fun part of the College World Series or dominating performances or dominating teams. And I tend to believe that the number one story of the College World Series is a Jello shot challenge.
That's entirely possible. It's certainly the closest scoreboard watching I've done so far in the series. It's it's kind of taken. I mean, they were talking about it on the ESPN broadcast last night. Obviously, it's all over social media. It's kind of taken over the narrative. And to be fair, the Arkansas fans are going above and beyond.
Yeah.
Ole Miss is doing their best to hang in there, but apparently they like their shots down there in Arkansas.
So it's a great marketing thing.
Oh, 100%.
And the people that run Rococo's Cantina and then Lefties, which is right next to it, they have been besieged by people, just people coming in, having a good time. And that's a good thing. The couple that runs both of those joints, they're really, really nice people.
Mhm.
But every time I've been down there outside of the College World Series, there are very few people that are in either place. And what has happened the last couple of days is marketing genius.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, a Jello shot. We were talking with Shane because Shane is a big fan of the non-alcoholic Jello shot.
Isn't that just Jello?
It's really a great deal.
I will let you address that with Shane. Well, it's what, at the most 50 cents. And they're the upsell and the $4.50 that they're selling it for. But it's a great thing. And they've taken it a step further because now they're going to donate part of the proceeds to food pantries in Arkansas and Mississippi, which is really, really cool. So you're taking this thing that was a great marketing tool that took off, and in the day and age of social media blew up and everybody was sharing it. I mean, the fact that people are talking about it is enough. It's not being overshadowed by something else that's going on at the College World Series. I mean, this is the storyline. So they're going to make a good thing out of it. But I think that's the storyline. And that's too bad because coming in, you thought, man, the field is wide open. There's going to be excitement. There isn't the abundance of first-round draft picks because the 8 teams here, some of their better players are guys that aren't draft eligible until next year. But we have now gone through 5 days of the College World Series where the 2 betting favorites a week ago, Texas and Stanford, have already gone home 2 in the queue.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't had a game within 4 runs. That's amazing to do that in the first 10 games. First time it's ever happened.
Well, see, that's where I thought you were going, was that the story of the College World Series is that there were just no good baseball games. And that's not to say that no good ball has been played. Obviously, individual teams within the game, individual players have played well. But in terms of a competitive, grinded out baseball game, we haven't seen any of that. Not even close, really. The closest thing we had was probably that wacky Oklahoma Texas A&M game to start, where obviously Oklahoma got off to that big lead and then Texas A&M kind of chipped back and made it interesting for a while. But that's literally the closest game we've had. That was a 4-run win there. It hasn't been that competitive in individual games, which is, to go this deep and not have anything like that is pretty bizarre.
It's a weird College World Series because the couple of days of heat, and it was beautiful last night. The attendance is through the roof, but the games aren't competitive, and the games are usually over by the 4th and 5th inning. So it then turns into, you're saying, all right, here we all we need is outs. Let's just get outs. Let's get out of here. These games start to grind, which is not good for growing the game, so to speak. But it just, you score early or you get a dominating pitching performance by your starter, whether it be in a winner's bracket, loser's bracket game, more than likely you're going to win. And I mean, Kevin and I talked about it on the air last night, Ravi. It's hard to fathom that you would go through 10 games and not have a game within 4 runs.
Well,
that's hard to do.
Just in baseball in general.
Yes.
I mean, baseball is such a weird sport, right? You could have, let's use the major leagues, for instance. You could have the best team in baseball play the worst team in baseball 10 games in a row, and you would have a close game somewhere in there, just by chance. That's how baseball works. It's weird. You have bizarre things happen. Somebody, some pitcher goes on a heater for 6 innings that you don't expect. But we've got the 8 best teams in college baseball here. I mean, some would argue 8 of the 10 or 12 best teams, obviously with Tennessee gone and people like that. But you've got 8 of the best teams in college baseball here, and nobody can play a close game.
No.
It's one of the most bizarre things.
First time in 75 years.
Yeah.
Which means the whole College World Series.
Which that's kind of, I will say, one of the most fun things about baseball in general is on any given week or year or season, whatever, you're going to see some things that that have probably never happened in baseball before, or at least have never happened in about 50 years. And we've had a few of those in Omaha this week. So I guess that's the silver lining to the fact that none of these games are close, is that, well, at least it's history, right?
Yep.
But I would enjoy breaking a little history here and getting a couple close ball games before we're done.
We will see if we get that today. Oklahoma and Texas A&M play at 1, and then later tonight, Arkansas and Ole Miss. Ole Miss and OU are 2-0. Welcome in, everybody, on a hump day. We will have lots to discuss. Tomorrow is the NBA draft. Tonight is Game 4 of the Stanley Cup Finals. Shane's adopted Avalanche take on the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Damn right.
We'll either have it be a 3-1 series or a 2-2. We can't even get close games in the Stanley Cup Finals outside of Game 1. We got 7-0, 6-2. We can't get close games in the NBA Finals. Who did we piss off?
I don't know. It's
I don't know.
It's a pretty bizarre deal. I mean, it was the whole NBA playoffs, right?
No game below 10 points.
There were, for a couple rounds after the first round of the NBA playoffs was great. And then you had 3 rounds of just blowouts. And the series were close, but not a lot of close games. I will say I'm super excited for the draft. I'm a huge NBA draft nerd.
I know you are, and we will get into that because coming up a little bit later at 7:40, Derek Murray is going to join us. He's got some thoughts on the NBA draft, on what Orlando should do. Saw Bruce Pearl the other day. I said, if Auburn wins, are you going to come back? Because you're going to be in Brooklyn tomorrow night for the NBA draft, because your guy could go number 1. And he said, I'll come back. Well, he doesn't have to because Auburn was eliminated.
And cancel that flight.
It'll be, when we get into this and then we talk to our guest on who should go number 1 and who will go number 1 because of what Orlando likes, the length and athleticism. Things go to Jabari Smith. I'm a Banchero guy when it comes to the NBA, but I don't foresee him going even in the top 2. I mean, not bad to go to 3. You go to Houston.
The consensus seems to be right now that he's going to go 3, although there was some betting line movement for him at 1 in the last 12 hours or so. I'll be honest, I'm sure we'll get into this more. I think I'm a Chet guy.
At number 1?
Yeah, I think, because out of that's that group of 3, right? It's Jabari Smith, Chet Holmgren, and Paolo Banchero. Paolo, I think, is the most NBA ready right now, which he's a good fit in Houston with Jalen Green. Kind of got the inside-outside thing. I think if you're willing to play Paolo as a center, I actually kind of like that. I don't think he's a 3, and I'm not sure he's a 4. If you play Paolo at center, I'm starting to get real interested. But as far as, listen, I'm in the top 3 for a reason.
Yep.
I'm probably not very good. I need to take a swing at a generational superstar, which we're not sure if any of these 3 guys are or not. Sure. I think your best swing at that is Holmgren. Now, he probably has the lowest floor of those 3 also. So you've got a pretty wide variance there. But if you're just talking about, hey, I'm trying to shoot the moon here, I think you got to go Chet.
We were together. This was shortly after the NCAA tournament had ended. And we were talking about Holmgren. And if you're Orlando, you've got Jalen Suggs, so you could reunite him with his high school teammate. But you also, what if Holmgren had 40 more pounds on him? We wouldn't even be discussing. We'd be discussing who's going to be number 2.
Honestly, I don't even think it'd have to be 40. If you got him to above 200 pounds, like solidly, like 210, which is only like 15, 20 pounds more than what he is right now, I don't think we're even having a conversation, which is part of the reason I lean Chet, right? Because it's like, listen, I get that he maybe doesn't have the frame to put on a ton of more weight, but he's got less injury history, which is basically to say none, than a lot of the guys that we just kind of don't even worry about injury-wise. It's because he's built so strangely, right? We saw the same thing with KD. If KD had if there had been a version of KD that had come along before the 2007 draft, he 100% goes above Odin, right? It's the fact that when we see a body type that we don't understand, all of a sudden we get real hesitant about it, which I get, right? You want to see a track record, you want to see a prototype, you want to have a comp that you can point to a guy. But look at all the guys that end up being unbelievable in NBA history. They're the guys that don't have a comp, right? You look at the guys that make history that are your all-time greats. None of them had a comp coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And listen, I'm not saying Chet's going to be an all-time great, but it seems like a silly way to go about trying to draft a generational superstar by looking for somebody who he might be the same type of player as, when that hasn't typically been how this goes.
Yeah, there is nobody a comp for a guy like Chet Holmgren.
No, not at all. It's
no
one of the most
history of the NBA.
Not even a little bit. It's one of the most bizarre combinations of body and skill set we've ever seen.
And is he worth the risk? And if he pays off great. But that's the the crapshoot that is the draft.
100%.
And he's either going to make you really, really happy, or you're going to hear it for a while. But you have to be comfortable. But you're either Orlando or you're Oklahoma City or you're Houston. I think out of the top 5, because then you throw in Ivy and Keegan Murray join the conversation, and that seems to be the consensus 5 that would go. Maybe an upsetters.
Ben Mathurin is the only other guy that might sneak into the top 5.
I think he's a guy that could knock Murray out of the top 5.
Yeah, I agree. I think Ivy is pretty locked in at 4, either with Sacramento or if they trade out.
Mm-hmm.
But Mathurin, there's people that love Ben Mathurin from Arizona, so that's the only thing that I think could upset that top 5. But I think the top 6 is pretty much locked in.
Derek Murray will join us coming up at 7:40. Brandon Vogel stops by at 8. Nebraska got their 9th commitment of the class of 23 yesterday. They went into the state of Colorado, got a linebacker who play inside linebacker in Hayden Moore, could also play baseball. He's got a 90-mile-an-hour fastball. Your selling point to someone that is being courted by the Buffs that likes to play 2 sports, hey, Hayden, tell me about that baseball program there in Boulder. And he'll go, and someone will go, hey, John Stearns, if you are an old-time Mets fan, John Stearns played college baseball at Colorado. There are some programs, some universities that don't have baseball, and most of them are around climates where it's not real conducive.
Sure.
Is Iowa State, Wisconsin, Colorado are 3 that come to mind around this area that don't have baseball. But if you're not going to, you're seeing this in the SEC, in the Big Ten, and in the Big East locally, is if you're not going to invest in that sport, it's not worth it.
Oh, 100%.
Not worth it whatsoever. I mean, but if you invest in it and you happen to be in location, we're seeing in the College World Series why the SEC is so good in baseball. In 13 of the last 14 years, there's been an SEC team in the championship.
Which it's Wisconsin and Iowa State, but the state of Iowa, it's surprising to me that those 2 schools have decided not to invest in baseball, because especially for being northern schools, they've got good baseball in those states.
Yep. Yeah, the state of Wisconsin produces some really good high school prep talent.
They produce really good prep talent. They also, I believe, run one of the, it's not the Cape Cod League, but they run, I believe, a pretty good summer league up there for.
Yeah, there's Summer Wood and Bat League. Green Bay is really good. Lacrosse is good.
Yeah, they have
right in the city that Wisconsin is, Madison.
Right. So you've got good exposure to baseball in Wisconsin. Obviously, Iowa, especially for the size of the state, produces really good baseball talent as well. You know that. And so it's weird to me. Colorado makes some sense. I mean, you get some guys out of Colorado, but it's an awkward fit there. But Iowa State and Wisconsin really kind of surprised me that they haven't invested in that, or just chose a long time ago not to invest in it. It doesn't make a ton of sense to me.
Man, I did the last game. Nebraska played at Iowa State. I did the last game at Captain Field before they shut the program down. I mean, they already knew that was going to be the last year.
Yeah.
Ooh, that was weird. That was weird.
It
was very awkward.
It's like speaking at a funeral when the person's still alive.
I was like sad. People didn't know whether to steal the bleachers or cry or go out and get some dirt. It was really uncomfortable.
Sure.
But it was, Iowa State didn't have the finances to invest in baseball. And Lyle Smith was their head coach, one of their last head coaches, and he was good, but man, he had to work really, really hard. And they were competitive, but they didn't invest anything in the program. They played, kind of not off campus, but away from the activity in campus.
Sure.
And the most exciting thing to happen is you could bring your own beer and sit in the stands and drink, but the facility wasn't great. It was, but if you're going to invest in it, you got to go all in. But I wonder, quick thing about Wisconsin, because we're going to circle back to this in the SEC and why they will continue to dominate baseball, is Big Ten programs that are thinking about a sport or two, men or women, to add. When this new TV money kicks in, will that allow some schools to add men's and women's hockey if they don't have it, and they've been interested in it, or baseball, or another sport that they've never been able to have, and all of a sudden they have a huge influx of money, and they take that money and they invest it in a new sport?
Do you think that's where the new money goes, though? Or do you think it just...
I would love to see that.
I would, too. I think it'd be terrific.
Because look at the SEC. I mean, let's start on this topic. Look at the SEC. And as it pertains to baseball.
Yeah.
Now, again, location. In the southeast part of the country is a big youth prep baseball area.
But it's not just location, right? Because California, the West Coast, is also enormous for baseball, and we're not seeing the same level of success out of the Pac-12.
You just, in California, you have 26 Division I programs. So your talent
is
going to
spread out a little bit more.
But you look at some of the powers that are in the state of California that used to be, they're no longer rising up. I mean, Stanford is one of the rare ones that is kind of, and they went through a little bit of a downfall that if they've kept up. But in the SEC, they've taken that football money, and some of that football money has been reinvested in men's basketball and women's basketball, but more on men's basketball and the coaches that you're hiring, but in baseball. And the facilities are unreal in baseball. Dave Van Horn the other day was telling me, Ravi, about Arkansas is now done with their entire upgrade. I mean, it's like a lab.
Yeah.
They've got their own humongous weight room, baseball only. They've got a lot of stuff that are just dedicated to baseball. I mean, that's why Will Bolt at Nebraska wants a lot of stuff that a place like Arkansas has that are just for the baseball program. You don't share it with other sports. But the facilities across the league are incredible, and a lot of it has to do with athletic directors saw extra football money, TV deal, and they reinvested it, and they went after baseball, looking at their model of what sports can we get our biggest return on investment. If we invest and we win, that it's going to come back to us. And I think a lot of schools are looking at baseball and softball in the Southeastern Conference, but definitely baseball. I mean, baseball, it almost forces you to be good, because if you're not, you're going to get pummeled in that league.
Oh, yeah. You get embarrassed pretty much on a weekend in, weekend out basis if you're not solid in the SEC. I wonder if that model appeals to, say, the Big Ten, for example, because there's not really a proof of concept in the Big Ten as far as that part of it's concerned. Not to say that there's not good programs, but the SEC had LSU, right? They could say, not only can this be a huge deal, not only can we actually make some money on what has been a non-revenue sport across most of the country, but if we pour into this, we can get national attention, we can get fan interest, we can, like I said, actually make a little bit of money, and we can bring in, if we've got the facilities, the people will come. I mean, LSU kind of put it out there for everyone to see, and the SEC powers that be decided to follow that model. I don't know if the Big Ten has a model to follow like that. I mean, it could be Nebraska because they decide to do it on their own. Michigan obviously has had a lot of success in baseball as well, although they're going to have to try and rebuild there with a new coach.
And they tried to hire Jim Penders from UConn yesterday, and he stayed at UConn, which is a win for the Big East.
It is, for sure, which is a little surprising because the Big East is even further down the totem pole than the Big Ten as baseball is concerned. But that would be my question on whether or not the same thing would happen with Big Ten money. I would imagine hockey probably makes more sense for the Big Ten. Volleyball, continue to invest in volleyball for a lot of those Big Ten schools. I just don't know how high baseball is on the list for the Big Ten schools that are getting that new money.
And I agree. And with the new money that could be coming into the Big Ten or will be coming into the Big Ten, it may be a simple thing of let's reinvest it in football.
That's the other thing, right? That's the easy
because let's go big and compete
and
on
try and
that
catch up.
Sport. Yes.
Even, I know the Big Ten likes to say, oh, we're just as good as the SEC. Outside of Ohio State, you're not really on a year in, year out basis. So do they try and use that money to catch up with the SEC a little bit? Maybe they go all in even further on being the best men's basketball league in the country. I could see that for sure. kind of seeing how the Big Ten has treated baseball in general since Nebraska's been a part of it. I don't think baseball is very high on that priority list for the Big Ten.
And there's another part of, and there's some really good programs throughout the Midwest when it comes to youth and prep and traveling teams. It's just not as organized as well. And
you can't play. I mean, the year-round thing matters.
And then there's the other part of, okay, you develop players, you've got players in your area. Where are they going to go? When they go somewhere and you have these Taj Mahal facilities, the SEC treats baseball like an event, like a big party. They make it a big deal. There's only a couple of schools in the Big Ten where you could say, hey, if you go to a game there on a weekend and the weather is nice, which is, maybe you get a month and a half in the Big Ten.
You're right.
It becomes an event.
Sure.
I think you see when you hire somebody from a background of the Southeastern Conference, for example, and I don't care what sport, but in their big boy sports, they know what that atmosphere is like. They know what the passion is like. And so listening to the SEC coaches talk this week and then kind of knowing what Will wants to do in Lincoln, that's SEC. He wants the facilities, baseball-only facilities, but he also wants to make it a big event and a big party. A big party area out in left field. Make it where it's a big deal to come to a game because you're going to have fun because that looks good on TV. That looks good to recruits. And that's a fun place to play. You want to make it a very difficult place to play, but I can't think of maybe – can I think of another one in the Big Ten that you could say, man, when you go to blank, it's an event. It's a big party. It's like going to the Duty Noble, which you would never get close to that in this conference.
No,
or even what happens in Fayetteville.
Well, and it's not just
LSU.
It's not just a vanity or a recruiting thing either. It's an actual competitive advantage.
Yes.
Right? I mean, that's what we've seen with
Recruiting.
The teams from the SEC. They don't seem to be shaken by the atmosphere here in Omaha, right? Not that everybody's performed super well, but these teams that are used to playing even in front of, 6,000 to 8,000 on a regular basis, and some of them are more than that, I understand. But if you've consistently got a decent crowd, it's a lot different going from 0 to 24,000 than it is to go from 8 to 10,000 to 24,000. You're used to the fact that you have to adjust for the atmosphere. Half of these other schools, whether it's Stanford, whether it's Notre Dame, most of their games are played in basically arenas like we saw the Big Ten baseball tournament down at the Chuck a couple weeks ago, right? You got a smattering of fans. You can hear every word that any fan says. It's like a friends and family only atmosphere. And that's not where winning baseball is played. It's just not. I've seen high school atmospheres that are more exciting than what we've seen in a lot of in the Big Ten baseball tournament.
It's exciting.
The Nebraska State high school baseball tournament gets better atmospheres than that did. And that's
You are not kidding.
I'm not.
People
I'm
saw
not
what happened at Tal Anderson. Yeah.
I'm not even exaggerating. That's embarrassing for the Big Ten. And it's one of those things where at some point you either have to decide to make it a thing or pull all the way back. And it seems like they're a lot closer to pulling all the way back than they are to investing in it in a real way.
Yeah, I would like to hear, even anonymously, Big Ten athletic directors polled on where they think they will spend their extra money. Will they put it into facilities? Will they hold on to it, put it in the coffers? Will they invest it in football? Will they try something different, a sport that they haven't had success at, or a new sport? I'm thinking as we go through this conversation, Robbie, I think the reinvestment in football or an additional investment in football will come from the Big Ten's money, where the SEC took their football money, gave part of it to football because you got us this amount, and then distributed to other sports where I think athletic directors and most importantly, the conference gives you the framework of, hey, we can win in this sport. We've got a built-in advantage in this sport. Let's go all in. And that message starts at the top with a guy like Greg Sankey. Does it start at the top with Kevin Warren going, as a conference, all right, we want to win in football. We want to win in men's basketball. What other sport can we win in and be the best in that? We've already got volleyball. 2 Big Ten teams played in the national championship game.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know this is a hot take here. I wouldn't necessarily call Kevin Warren a visionary or an innovator. So that might cause some problems in the
He was trying to be optimistic.
in that might cause some issues in the investing in new sports or reinvesting in sports that maybe you could double down on. Really,
that's a bit of a problem.
The only place I could see that is hockey, just going really hard into hockey. You're in a lot of the markets that you're in, that makes a ton of sense. They have huge hockey presences. I don't think that the Big Ten is going to invest. I don't think they're going to invest in baseball. I don't know that softball makes a ton of sense the way that the SEC is invested into it. Honestly, I admire the way that the SEC has gone after baseball because it wasn't always like that. It hasn't always been.
It used to be the Pac-10, then Pac-12 teams would dominate.
They would dominate,
or the Cal State Fullerton types,
and also just the we were talking about the atmospheres, right? It was LSU had great atmospheres. If you had a big marquee matchup coming to town, you might get, if you had a Florida State, Florida might get a really nice atmosphere down there. And that wasn't that long ago where it was kind of hit and miss the way it is other places. It's not like that anymore. Most weekends, if you're at a good SEC baseball school, you're getting a packed house, you're getting a great atmosphere. And I give them credit for that. I think they saw what kind of passion the College World Series evoked in their fans. And they say, hey, why do we have to wait until a couple weekends in June to do that? We have good baseball down here all year. Half the time, half our conference is in Omaha anyway. Why don't we just do this all season? And they pulled it off. It's really a testament to their ability to capitalize on, like you said, some built-in advantages and some additional funding that came from football.
All right, coming up also a little bit later in the last hour, the 2-2-0 teams are back in action today. So we could have one game tomorrow, 2 games tomorrow, or no games tomorrow, and 2 days off before the championship series, which begins on Saturday. We'll talk Ole Miss. Nick Suss will join us from the Clarion Ledger. Ole Miss is the favorite. They have yet to lose in the NCAA tournament. And then Eric Bailey stops by to talk about OU, which will take on Texas A&M, a team they beat 13-8 on Friday. We'll probably also, Shane, is it fair? Can we sneak in some football questions for Eric?
Oh, yeah.
Some OU football questions? We can even talk basketball. Porter Mosier has.
It's a trap.
He was talking about his time. Remember when the College World Series at Rosenblatt and all the Creighton basketball players would carry cable for ESPN?
Yeah, well,
that's where you got to know the new players because they were in the stands hanging out.
You got to see him. Yeah, you got to see him carry cable. Now, I don't know if they're doing it this year. In years past, I know they've run parking lots around the stadium as well.
I think Justin Patton made a lot of money one year. He was right down by the stadium. He was like across the street from the old mat, and he was waving people in for parking. I don't know if Justin had any connection to that parking lot. But
those were the pre-NIL days. You had to get a little more creative.
Porter was telling the story of how he went to the College World Series as a basketball player at Creighton, and that's what he got to do. He got to work for ESPN. All right, 6:40. Robbie is in for Damon. It's Sharp and Betting in the morning. Busy day again on the Zone. Day 6 of the College World Series. We send it downtown to Baseball Village and then into the booth for 12:40 today between OU and Texas A&M. And the nightcap tonight is Arkansas and Ole Miss. OU and Ole Miss are 2-0. We will talk more about Hayden Moore, the newest commitment for Nebraska. Also, Rob Gronkowski has retired. But for how long?
I'll say again.
But for how long? 6:40. There's Robbie. I'm Gary Shane here as well. Sharp and Betting in the morning on a hump day on 1620 The Zone.
Did a nice job of escaping the fourth, and here's a drive hit to left. Cole going back at the track, at the wall. That ball is gone.
Day 6 of the College World Series. I was just searching through some tweets. You know, every day, Robbie has a national blank. Today is National Kissing Day.
Whoa. Okay.
It's like, okay.
Good to know.
The question of the day is your most memorable kiss. I'll let you think about that. If it's not your wife, Shane has got a few that he's shared with us before on air of his most memorable kiss.
I mean, if it's not my wife, I'm going to lie, obviously. Yeah. That's a no-brainer there, Gary. You forget, this isn't my first go-around at marriage.
That's
learned a few things.
You know, if you remember it, it's like, wow. When I looked at this, I thought, I know exactly the one.
Really?
Uh-huh. I wonder what she's doing these days. I'm just kidding. So, welcome to National Kissing Day. That is a thing. So I celebrate as you would. Just make sure that the person that is receiving is accepted.
I was going to say, celebrate consensually.
Will this be because, you know, when Texas A&M, when they play in a Kyle Field and they score a touchdown, you kiss the person next to you. Texas A&M is playing in baseball today, so every time that the Aggies score a run, that
you don't have as many. What do they call them? Cadets? No, they don't call them cadets. There, what do they call them? Because they all
call them cadets.
They have all the guys in the military get up, right?
Yes.
That seems to be a big thing for them specifically. They kind of make up the heart of the
core.
The core. There we go. I got the C.
The core of cadets. The core of cadets is what they call them in College Station.
So they seem to be the driving force behind some of the Texas A&M traditions there. Don't see a lot of them up here this week, so maybe they won't be as aggressive with their romantic celebrations during baseball game today.
They sing at the end of the game. It was pretty cool yesterday. The entire Texas A&M team lined up. You know, people are very familiar with the Eyes of Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Win or lose, the Texas players stand in front of their fans and they sing the Eyes of Texas. The Aggies line up for the Aggie War Hymn.
Yep.
And they line up, you know, shoulder to shoulder along the first base line. And then there's the part, I don't know enough about the Aggie War Hymn, but there's the part of the song where everybody locks arms and they sway back and forth, and then they finish up the song. It is a pretty good sight. I mean, we're all SEC this morning, but that's pretty cool. And then if you ever go to a game at Kyle Field and you've got nearly 100,000 people there.
I was going to say that's
and everybody
because
the press box shakes.
Yeah.
When people start doing the Aggie War Hymn, I mean, their band is fantastic. I missed that in our time in the Big 12 is going down to College Station and seeing their band perform on the field because they are one of the best college bands. They're the core of cadet band and the marching formations that they do. But their traditions, the traditions at Texas A&M, Texas, some of the other SEC schools, but those two in particular are pretty cool. It's funny, the Texas A&M baseball contact, sports information contact, I was standing next to him yesterday while they were doing it. We were waiting for Nathan Detmer to get done. And I said, you ever participate in that? Because they had a lot of like non-baseball people that were locked arms with the players.
Yeah.
And I said to him, you ever do that? And he goes, no. He goes, and he turned away and he goes, because I used to be at Texas.
Oh,
how's that going? Yes.
Yeah, that's a little awkward. He probably keeps that as close to the vest as possible.
He played it off well. I said, how do you go from Austin to College Station? He goes, by car.
Whoa. Listen, opportunity speaks.
Yes.
That's the key there. I will say, and I think Scott Van Pelt brought this up when the Avs were singing in their 7-0 victory over the Avs fans were singing in their 7-0 victory over the Lightning. We don't do enough singing here in our American sports culture. It's a big thing in Europe, especially England with the Premier League and stuff like that. Every team has a song and they sing their like team song. I know like Liverpool is "You'll Never Walk Alone," the
Mhm.
Elvis song. Not as much singing in American sports, and I kind of tend to agree with SVP here. I think there should be more.
When did they teach you like the words of the fight song at your school, your high school or your college?
So never, basically, is the answer. So that is part of the problem. There is not every school kind of commits to it the way a Texas A&M does. I know
Never,
like
ever,
Michigan does with
Yeah.
your hailed to the victors or whatever. So there's places in college that do it. In American pro sports, it's almost non-existent, which is I think what I think SVP was lamenting a little bit. But I think
mean,
it
the
adds
official
some.
fight song of Fenway Park, "Sweet Caroline,"
That's true. See,
or
and
"Dropkick Murphys."
as much as certain people on this radio station hate Sweet Caroline, I'm looking at you, Hap.
It's a popular thing to do.
It was a very, it's a memorable thing. It's part of the atmosphere of the games. And I mean, we had a moment here in Omaha during Creighton's first Big East game with the Sweet Caroline moment
Yeah.
that we had. It's when it happens, it's a pretty cool thing. I understand why they do it in England with their soccer games and everything, or football matches, should I say. It's a pretty cool atmosphere and kind of a way to connect all the fans together. I wish it happened a little more here.
Well, when it's an event, you have orchestrated cheers
Yeah,
and chants
Exactly.
and songs that are sung.
I want more of it. I think it increases the enjoyment of the experience, I think.
You look at you've watched enough. You've seen. So they've changed at Fenway Park. They change the words to the part of this song to include the Yankees.
Well, yeah, you got to. It's like the Texas A&M Texas thing. You got to get your jabs in where you can.
All right, Shane. The people that have not gotten up yet or are waking up to the show. Speaking of, before we go to break, you brought up the first Big East game. Buzz Williams brought that up when he was in town the other day.
Oh, did he?
The Texas A&M men's basketball coach, because that was the first Big East game was on New Year's Eve, and Marquette played here, and Buzz Williams was the coach.
Yep. He
was wondering how sauced people were. He didn't say that on air, but it
was a late start.
Stories about that.
I believe it was a 9 p.m. tip, and I can attest, they were very sauced.
And they've done it periodically, but didn't Fox do like 4 games, like a whole day on New Year's Eve of Big East basketball?
It was a basically wall to wall. I think they started at 11 a.m. and then Creighton was anchoring the coverage there against Marquette, because Marquette was the favorite in the league that year.
Yep.
They were supposed to win the league, and Creighton went out and beat them, and the Sweet Caroline thing happened and everything. It caused Marquette to have a turnover, which was my favorite part of it. But yeah, that was one of my favorite experiences for the game being. I mean, obviously Creighton won, so that was cool, but the game itself was sort of forgettable. I was like, I want to say 60 something to 50 something, not a barn burner by any means, but for it being a somewhat forgettable game, one of my favorite game experiences.
Seems like when Marquette comes to Omaha, there are memorable moments that are created.
Damn right, yes.
Yeah, some of them not memorable in the best ways, but memorable for sure.
And Buzz Williams, he was very curious on how much alcohol was consumed. The BAC was awful high that night in the old CenturyLink.
I think we would have set a new shots record over at across the street.
The shots challenge is the storyline of the College World Series.
We
need better baseball. We need more Link Jarrett in the game of baseball.
We do. Link Jarrett's an interesting guy.
I am such a fan. And it's unfortunate because Notre Dame will try, but Florida State, kind of like Arkansas did with Van Horn when he was at Nebraska, and Bill Byrne tried to keep Dave Van Horn, but the heartstrings pulled him to Fayetteville. I think the same thing's going to happen with Link Jarrett. I think Notre Dame will make a play to try and keep Link Jarrett, but going back to his alma mater,
that's a pretty strong pull.
Yeah, you graduated from there. Your wife graduated from there. Your parents live in Tallahassee.
Well, and he played in the College World Series there. I mean, there's too much there's a lot of connective tissue between Link Jarrett and Tallahassee. Notre Dame can do what they want. I imagine Florida State will pay whatever it takes. Yep. And with all the other intangibles there, I don't know how Notre Dame keeps him.
Coming up in the next hour, we'll get into the NBA draft, which is tomorrow night. Orlando is on the clock. They like length and versatility. So who does that mean they're going to take at number 1? Derek Murray will stop by a little bit later. Brandon Vogel, Nebraska, has got their 9th commitment to the class of 23. Inside linebacker from the state of Colorado, outside of Denver, in the Denver area. Hayden Moore. So that is number 9, and Nebraska goes back into Colorado where they haven't been for a couple of years. So Brandon will join us at 8. And then in the last hour, we'll get the report from the 2-2-0 teams, Ole Miss and OU. Baseball today begins. We'll be on the air at 12:40 with a pregame show ahead of Oklahoma and Texas A&M. Texas A&M's got to win twice. Arkansas has got to win twice. Or we will have Ole Miss and Oklahoma just like everybody expected when the year began.
Yeah, that's the matchup that everybody anticipated, right? Ole Miss, Oklahoma. No, that's not what we had written down before the series started.
Maybe in one of those secondary bowl games, but not in the College World Series.
Oh my God.
That feels like an Outlook.com bowl.
It does. Hey, we played in the conference championship game, or we were like 3rd in our division.
Yeah.
Feels good.
We'll see you in San Antonio for the Alamo Bowl.
It feels like the destiny of Oklahoma in the post-Lincoln Riley era, maybe.
That's coming up a little bit later. That's Ravi. I'm Gary. This is Sharp and Betting in the Morning with Shane and 1620 The Zone. Finish up the first hour. Terry in the Equitable Bank inbox, where they take banking personally. Gary at 1620thezone.com. Hi, guys. Hi, Terry. Texas A&M brought their band, the Cadets, the Corps of Cadets band, to Memorial Stadium a couple times to perform at halftime. Awesome display. I did a road trip to A&M, the infamous Cotton Bowl game, as well as the Big 12 championship game with A&M. Love their fans and enthusiasm they have. Hate the Longhorns and their stupid fans.
That's something I think everybody can agree on, right?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
the universal thing in the sports that we can all agree on is our dislike for Texas.
I think that's why Nebraska and Texas A&M fans are maybe kind of kindred spirits because of their Texas A&M is probably the only place that hates Texas more than we do, which I think is
throw OU in there.
Oh, sure, OU, yeah. Although OU's been so much better than Texas. How mad can they really be?
I do miss the trips to Kyle Field for Big 12 football.
Nebraska, it's one of the best atmospheres in college football.
Unbelievable. Yeah. And usually something peculiar would happen in a game down there. Either a late rally.
Oh, yeah.
Taylor to Purify. The Fog game in 2002, which Nebraska rallied with David Horn and Jamal Lord. and then one of the cadets on the field going after Philip Bland. There's a lot has happened. I miss that, but the band is fantastic. Coming up next hour, we'll talk draft, NBA draft tomorrow night.
Sharpen betting in the morning on 1620 The Zone, 1620thezone.com, and the 1620 The Zone app. Here are Gary Sharp and Ravi Lula.
The 0-2, bouncing ball. Oh, McIntyre lunging to his left, snares it with the glove and underhands to first. That's an outstanding reaction by McIntyre with the lunge left, stuck it in the glove, and there's 2 away in the 6th.
Last night, Arkansas jumped on Auburn early, and then they got a great performance on the mound from Will McIntyre, who was like their 20th man in the pitching staff earlier this year, and he pitched one of the best games that Arkansas baseball has had here at the College World Series ever, and Arkansas stays alive, and they send Auburn home, and they follow the blueprint. You jump on a team early, you get a good performance from your starter, you preserve the bullpen, and you stay alive for another day. And Arkansas will play tonight against Ole Miss. They'll have to beat them twice to get to the championship series. OU, Texas A&M later today. The Will McIntyre story, really good. And once Arkansas started putting up big numbers last night, they could let him go as long as he wanted, and he got them through 7.
Yeah, I mean, being able to save their bullpen like that is obviously huge, considering having to play in back-to-back days. But I wanted to ask you about their decision to go with Zach Morris in game 2. Did you find that unusual at all? I mean, I know at this point in college baseball seasons, you're getting guys that have, like Will McIntyre, that have kind of worked their way into the position to get starts like this. But I don't know, it just felt really strange, the decision to, I know there were matchup issues at hand and things like that. It felt like you were putting a guy in a really big spot that maybe he was not ready for.
Possibly. I know definitely like the matchups of what kind of a lineup Ole Miss has factored into it. And, hindsight, and you'll probably use him again. But at least
he didn't wear himself out.
At least they get to that point. But Arkansas is in a good spot with their bullpen. If you have bullpen depth, and the way you have to manage your staff here is if you fall into the loser's bracket, you can say all hands on deck, everybody's available except for your previous starter and maybe somebody who logged a lot of pitches out of the bullpen. But you also have to play the game of, hey, we're going to win this game. What am I going to do the next day? So you have to kind of plan ahead. And for Arkansas, that became a lot easier last night when they were up 8-0, right? Basically before the 5th inning, that they could start planning how their pitching would look for the rest of the night and then what it would start to look like for tomorrow. So I imagine that by the time they left the stadium last night, DVH and his great pitching coach, Matt Hobbs, they knew exactly who was going to pitch today.
Yeah, I mean,
and how they were going to go after him and then who was next.
It's amazing what putting up a few crooked numbers will do for the depth of your pitching staff, right? I mean, obviously, it gives your starter a lot longer of a leash. Not that McIntyre needed it last night. He was pretty dominant the entire night, had the one fluky mistake on the home run, and that's about it, And so that puts you in a really nice position. And honestly, I know some guys don't pitch well with big leads, but for the most part, I think pitchers more often than not like having that little bit of cushion there because you don't have to be perfect. You can throw strikes. You don't have to try and nibble too much. And you can kind of, not that this is a thing that people do very often anymore, but you can allow yourself to pitch to contact a little bit and allow your fielders to kind of make the plays there, which we saw, especially on the infield last night. Arkansas battles, especially, just incredible with their infield defense. But it's amazing what having a few runs on the board allows you to do from a pitching standpoint, both with your starter and kind of planning things out for the future. Getting off to that quick start last night was huge for Arkansas.
All we ask is a close game today.
Just one.
First time in 75 years.
Just give us one.
Entire history of the College World Series. 10 games. First 10 games, no game has been decided by less than 4 runs. Just a close game, please.
I'm not even
8th inning where the game is still in doubt.
I'm not even asking for a walk-off or anything. Just give me something close.
Yeah, we don't want to be greedy.
No, not yet. I mean, maybe. Maybe later.
Maybe we'd like a little drama.
It's a tiny bit after the 4th inning. That'd be terrific.
That's all we ask. That's all we ask. There's Ravi. I'm Gary. Shane here as well. Sharp and Betting in the Morning. Let's talk to Random Mike. Hello, Mike.
Hey, I did hear that interview with the Notre Dame coach, and I totally agree. And to be honest, one of the few times I've rooted for Notre Dame ever.
Yeah,
he was a big part of it.
He makes it easy. He's so good for college baseball and that program. I mean, he loves talking about baseball, and he's somebody that strikes me as when they do those dugout interviews, he would just keep talking if you would allow him, because he likes talking baseball. And I've enjoyed getting to know him, and we'll see what happens. But I think Florida State's going to get a gem. That will be a home run hire, and it'll be unfortunate for Notre Dame because Notre Dame's had a nice little run of good head coaches that go elsewhere because you're going to have two. Maneri went to LSU, and Link Jarrett more likely to go to Florida State. Pat Murphy left as well. But that's the disadvantage of being a good baseball program in the North, where you can't fully commit to the financial aspect of it, that somebody's going to come and take your guy if they give him the right deal.
Right. Very analogous to Van Horn. But I got to tell you, Van Horn, since I've been sort of a conscious Husker fan, probably the best hire ever at Nebraska. And I know there were some rough edges, but what he did, and when he left for Arkansas, I totally believed him when he said, look, this is the only place I would leave Nebraska for. And I think a big part of it, Gary, was his relationship with his former coach, who kind of made it very personal, like kind of begging him to come back, right?
Exactly. He was Norm DeBrin. They basically, they call the Hogs. They called Dave home. I think I've told this story, Mike. And I've known Dave for 20 years, and we have a good relationship, and it's always great to see him come back here and catch up on what's going on with his family. But when he was at Nebraska, and I tell this to a lot of people, he's near the top of the coaches that I've ever covered, that I've gotten to develop a relationship with outside of their respective sport, that you just have the feel that they are a winner, and you learn so much from them. And I will tell you, it was not as easy a decision as people in Arkansas will tell you. I went to his house in Lincoln because when I was working at KLIN in Lincoln, we had people stop and sign a card to ask Dave to stay. Mm-hmm. And it had thousands of signatures.
Wow.
And he wasn't taking calls, so I called his wife and I said, hey, can I stop by? And she said, certainly, we'd love to see you. And it was the day before he announced that he was going to Arkansas. And I went to his house midday to deliver these cards. And we walked in and we sat in his living room, and he kind of walked me through what was going on and all the emotions. And he got teary-eyed. He said, I don't want to leave this place, because in a short amount of time, Nebraska had that much of an impact on him. Mm-hmm. And he also felt, because it was back-to-back years of the College World Series where they went 2 in the queue, that he was not done. And he was torn. I mean, Bill Byrne tried. He gave him a lot of room, but he said, just know that if you want to stay, we're going to take care of you. We're going to make it worthwhile, but it's got to be your decision. And Dave was torn. It was not. People in Arkansas will say, oh, no brainer. Why would you stay at Nebraska? That's not the case. Dave thought seriously and long about staying at Nebraska, but if you look at it now, he made the right decision to go home, and Arkansas's program 20 years later is a monster.
Gary, I was in the Home Run Club. We made a few trips years ago. One of them was to Minnesota, and this was a few years after I think Van Horn left. But they showed on the bus, they showed a video of Van Horn talking to the team. Those team meetings, out in the field. But it was before a Sunday game, and I think it was with A&M. And this was from a few years back. And he's talking to the team, and he points to the other team that they're having a team meeting too on the field. And this is before the game. And he says to the team, you know what they're saying over there? It's a Sunday game. Before a Sunday game. And he says, you know what they're saying over there? They're saying, we can't get swept. We can't get swept. And you know what? They're going to get swept.
He was a master. Well, he still is. He's a master motivator. That had he had a huge dislike for definitely Texas, and he let his players know that those games meant a lot to him, And I think there were a lot of guys that at the time that played for him. I don't think he's the same way as he's gotten older with his Arkansas teams. But at Nebraska, there were a lot of guys that didn't like him, that were playing for him, but they played hard because they respected him. And at the time, they probably were not big fans of him. But when their career was over and they went and played professional ball or they got into the real world, they realized how impactful Dave was and the message that he was trying to give to them. Matt Hopper and Dan Johnson say we had a hard time with DVH because he was hard on us and we butted heads. But when it was over, you realized what he was doing to get you to play at that level. And that's something that is great to hear as a coach. And Dave did a good job of, he had Mike Anderson as his middleman. Mike Anderson was the liaison to the players, and Dave ran the show, and he was successful. And they've got to win twice, and then they got to win 2 more times. But if they get to the championship series, they're the sentimental favorite, especially what happened a couple of years ago against Oregon State when they were on the cusp of winning his first ever national title.
Yeah, and the fans have to not make so much damn noise on little pop-ups where infielders have to communicate.
Yeah, let's hope it doesn't. If they get to that point, it's going to be tough to beat Ole Miss twice. That doesn't come into play. Mike, thank you.
Yeah.
They keep showing that, the pop-up.
Yeah,
because there's another thing. So Arkansas, probably one of the better college baseball programs all time that hasn't won a national championship recently, is trying to come back after you lose a game. So Oregon State, who beat Arkansas that year, they came out of the losers bracket. They've done it twice. They did it in 2006 and then in 2018. So they were showing that video in-house yesterday just to say, hey, you can come back through the losers bracket. Oh, by the way, that is one of the most crushing things as an Arkansas fan.
Yeah.
And Van Horn has been part of 2 of the most crushing things as in Arkansas baseball recently. That moment here, and then last year.
Yeah.
That was a great Arkansas team. I mean, they didn't get as much pub as the Tennessee team.
Sure.
But during the regular season and the conference tournament, that Arkansas team was unbelievable. The arms that they had,
I think they hadn't lost a season series all year until the Supers.
Yeah, they had very little holes, and then Nebraska stressed them, and then they scored 21 on North Carolina State in the Super last year, and then they lose 2 one-run games at home, and they watch North Carolina State dogpile, and they don't make it here as the national number 1.
Well, not just 2 one-run games in a row, but you have your stud closer, Cops, in there, and can't get it done either night. You only need to win 1 game. Brutal way to go out last year when you were the prohibitive favorite. Again, maybe not as prohibitive as Tennessee was this year, but not too far off. And to be able to come back and make the College World Series after a year like that, even when you do lose some key pieces, is impressive in and of itself. But they are certainly up against it now that they have to beat Ole Miss twice. But again, this is an Ole Miss team that, while talented and was supposed to be good when the season started, has had some struggles of their own. It's not crazy to think they'd lose 2 in a row.
That's Ravi. I'm Gary. There's Shane, Sharp Betting in the Morning. Coming up in about 20 minutes, we'll dive into the NBA draft, which is tomorrow night. Orlando has the number 1 pick.
Yes,
Derek
indeed.
Murray will join us. Shane, any relation to Keegan or Chris Murray? That would be a better story, like a second cousin.
That would be outstanding. You'll have to ask him.
But this is what Derek does. So Shane gives us a show rundown sheet every day with the guests. And most of the guests we know we've had on before, so we don't really need a title. Derek Murray, National Grassroots and NBA Draft Analyst, NBA Draft Scout and Advisor for about 16 different organizations.
Yeah, just all the organizations.
He has an idea of what he's doing.
He's a busy man.
Yeah, and we'll go past the top 5. I mean, there's some boom or bust candidates that are going to be in the lottery range.
Yeah.
Damon and I were talking the other day. This is going to be a good night tomorrow night for the Big Ten.
There's a lot of prospects later in the draft that are really intriguing to me. Just guys that either I don't understand what they're doing in the first round at all in terms of mock drafts, or guys that you looked at and said, okay, there was a point not too long ago where this guy was considered a lottery top 10 type guy, and he's probably going to fall into the 20s? That's always kind of the part of the fun for me, is to see, okay, which is true? Which is true of the guy? The perception of him in December or going into his freshman year or this year in college basketball, or this late buzz that we think, maybe we don't like this guy as much as we thought we did. There's a lot of guys like that in this draft. And then there's also guys where you look at them, and if you didn't have kind of your preconceived notions of where people are supposed to be in the draft, you say, okay, is he really 15 spots worse than this other guy? Branham from Ohio State's a guy like that.
Whose stock is rising.
We still projected to go post lottery in the teens. And you're looking at him, you're like, is he actually worse? How much worse is he than Keegan Murray, for example? How much worse? Is he 15 spots worse? Because I don't know that he is.
I can't recall a player that had such a jump. And there was a lot to like about Keegan Murray last year, but had that much of a jump in the way that he played at Iowa, that you go from last year to being in top 5, top 6 of this draft. I mean, that's a monumental jump. He probably could have, off of last year, you could have convinced yourself potentially be a first-round draft pick.
Sure, back half.
But to move to the top 5 potentially.
Yeah, a no-brainer lottery guy, top half of the lottery, could sneak into the top 5. That was not on the table this time last year.
So Derek will join us coming up at about 7:40. Brandon Vogel at 8. We'll get his thoughts on the meaning of Hayden Moore. And speaking of Nebraska baseball, they are going to let him play baseball, which for the body type and what you need to do for football and strength and conditioning, how does it
positionally, it's a little weird.
Because you're a linebacker, what they want to do with you and what they're going to build you up. Can you still play baseball?
It's a little strange positionally, especially as a pitcher and a linebacker. There's other positions where it maybe makes a little more sense. That's going to be interesting.
He throws 90, so he can probably do whatever he wants on the baseball field. The Sharp Betting in the Morning on 1620 The Zone. We are in the middle of the week. The College Baseball Championship is well underway, and you've probably been working your way through the parking lot, all the tailgates. You know what you're going to find? Screwball Peanut Butter Whiskey. The original peanut butter whiskey is going to be at somebody's tailgate, or it's going to be on the table in front of you. As you know, everybody's having a good time. College Baseball Championship back here in Omaha. Celebrate the entire time with Screwball Peanut Butter Whiskey. It's a little sweet. It's a little salty. It's a little savory. You can mix it up however you like. It's unlike anything you've ever tasted before. But one thing is for sure, it's a perfect celebration of wild and wonderful in all of us. So hashtag get screwed. Raise a glass to all of us. Enjoy at the College Baseball Championship. Screwball Peanut Butter Whiskey, which you can find near you. Enjoy responsibly. Screwball Spirits, LLC, San Diego, California. Whiskey with natural flavors, 35% alcohol by volume. All right, Jamie asks on Twitter, old Nebraska baseball stories. I got two quick ones, and we'll get into some NBA draft talk. Van Horn did not like Texas at all, so he matched his athletic director. Bill Byrne absolutely hated Texas, despised Texas.
Okay.
And then he goes to Texas A&M, which Texas is their chief rival. So anytime Nebraska baseball played Texas, Van Horn always wanted to beat Texas.
Mm-hmm.
He always thought that Texas looked down at Nebraska. They didn't treat Nebraska with respect. He also got that from his time as a player at Arkansas.
I was going to say
when they were in the Southwestern Conference.
Some overlap there, yeah.
So he always had a thing for Texas, and he passed that down. So guys, they would take the Texas series beginning in '98 to his entire stay at Nebraska to another level. And they were playing a game. I remember this because the series started on a Saturday because of finals. So we fly down on a Friday into Austin, and Texas is really, really good. And it's the middle of May, first part of May, but it's like 105 degrees. And back then, Dish Falk Field had the old AstroTurf that heated up pretty quick.
Yeah.
And Nebraska had split the first two games of the series. So they were trying to win the series. They're playing on a Monday. It is air temperature like 97 degrees, but on the field, it's like 110.
Yeah.
And they usually let the starting pitcher pick the jersey that they, what the team's going to wear that day.
Mm-hmm.
And Van Horn said, we are going to wear black tops. And nobody really said anything. Like, what are you talking about? He said, we're going to wear black. And he goes, we're going to wear black because they're going to look at you and they're going to go, what are they doing? And he goes, and I remember this because I overheard him say this, and we're going to stick it up there wearing our black jerseys, and we're going to get out of here with a series victory. And they won the series. Now, a quick Texas A&M nugget. Nebraska's team hotel, I always remember, was behind a Whataburger. First time I ever went to a Whataburger. It was like a Holiday Inn right behind a Whataburger. And it was like if you walked across the street, you would make that long walk across campus before you got on like one side of the campus where Kyle Field was, and then you'd go across another road and a big giant parking lot, and the baseball field would be there. But we stayed right behind the Whataburger. And with Van Horn, and this is the case, there's a lot of coaches have this as well. There would be quote unquote Husker time. So if the bus left the hotel at 4:30, real and Husker time is 4:15. So the bus is going to leave at 4:15, even though on your itinerary it says 4:30. And even more so, once the head coach, Dave Van Horn, got on the bus, it was leaving.
Sure.
So he was the last guy on the bus. And if you weren't on the bus, you had to find a way to the ballpark. And he got on the bus, and there were a couple of key players that were like not very far behind him. But once he sat down, it was about time to go. And these two guys who were in the lineup that night get on the bus behind him. I remember him saying, and in Nebraska was number one. They went to College Station, and they were number one in the country. This was on the Saturday game that Texas A&M rallied to win. He goes, "We're going to lose tonight." I'm like, "Man, you got a good pitching matchup. Why?" He goes, "Guys were late for the bus." He goes, "They're not dialed in." He goes, "We're not treating this like we should."
Yeah.
And they lost 11-8. 7,000 people were at Olsen Field, and it was ball 1, ball 2, ball 5, ball 6. Place was going nuts. The upper deck was like swaying back and forth. But he said before the game, he goes, "We're going to lose tonight."
Yeah.
Because two guys were in his lineup were tardy getting on the bus. He goes, he said, "They're not respecting the game, and they don't respect the moment." I'm like, oh, okay.
I always kind of struggle with stories like that a little bit because on the one hand, I appreciate a coach that has that good of a pulse on their team. But I also really struggle with people who genuinely believe there's a correlation between getting on the bus 30 seconds earlier or later and winning a game. So that story kind of includes a lot of things there, you know? So maybe I'm going to give Dave Van Horn the benefit of the doubt and say it's not exactly about the bus. He just had a good pulse on where his team was at. And that was just a microcosm of the real problem.
Robbie, I was always scared that I was going to be late. I had I think it might have been Rob or Mike had to tell me, "This is Husker time. Your itinerary might say 4:30, but if you're not on the bus at 4:15, because that's when the head coach is on the bus, you're going to have to find a way to the ballpark."
And that's in the pre-Uber days. That's a little bit more challenging to get to the ballpark.
You would have been walking across the campus in College Station. All right, coming up next, we will dive into the NBA draft, which begins tomorrow night. Maybe also the Kyrie Irving doomsday clock is ticking once again. That'll be a storyline tomorrow night.
Isn't there always a Kyrie Irving doomsday clock?
Yeah, I thought we could stretch it a little bit further. But apparently he's at an impasse with Brooklyn.
Surprise, surprise. Kyrie Irving being difficult.
What does Kevin Durant say?
What does Kevin Durant say?
Well, what he says we'll see what the Nets do.
Wish I never left Golden State.
I think Kyrie and Russell Westbrook will be a story on draft night.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
Maybe they'll overshadow Jabari Smith or Chet Holmgren or Mr. Ben Carroll. We'll get into that. Derek Murray joins us next. Brandon Vogel, top of the hour. Sharp and Betting in the morning. Ravi in for Damon. There's Shane as well. 1620 The Zone.
Right there.
Season just ended. Now it's time for the NBA draft.
Damn right, yes.
The Orlando Magic are on the clock. Gets kind of intriguing. A lot of people focus on the top 3 to 5, but the entire first round, there are definitely some boomer bust guys that in college we went, huh? And they might end up in the lottery. So a great time to check in with Derek Murray, who joins us now. Talk some NBA draft and a couple other things that will surround the NBA draft that doesn't have to do with anybody coming out of college. Good morning, Derek. Welcome to Sharp and Betting in the Morning.
Hey, good morning, guys. Thanks for having me.
Hey, let's just start right at the top with Orlando. There, in any sport, when you get close to the draft, we see this in the NFL, we see this now in the NBA. You get these, these smoke screens, and people are floating theories and floating ideas. And all of a sudden, one guy who everybody has is maybe the third pick. Hey, he's in line to be number 1. Chet Holmgren seems to be that guy over the last, 12 to 18 hours that Orlando is now hot on him. What do you believe in rumors, and what do you honestly believe Orlando should do?
So I do believe that Orlando has been hot on him over the last, couple days. Holmgren did go down there to work out. But my understanding, and from talking to guys around the league, Holmgren's camp wants him in Oklahoma City. So I think that the Magic are deciding between Jabari and Paolo Banchero. And I think, and a lot of other guys do around the league, expect Jabari Smith to go first tomorrow.
Derek, with Chet Holmgren, is part of the hesitation that is seen, whether it's just in the media or actually in front offices, is part of the hesitation is that we just have no frame of reference for a guy like that with his build and skill set?
A little bit. He's one of those where some of the stats are undeniable. I mean, his rim protection is just innate, and it is hardwired into who he is. He's going to be an excellent spot-up shooter in the pros, as he has been his whole career. High school, he dominated as a shooter, shot well at Gonzaga. The questions around him come physically, and a lot of them, a lot of people get upset because it seems like you're beating a dead horse. And to a point, I understand that, but it is our job, and there are teams around the league concerned with his medicals. It's my understanding that he wouldn't take a couple of the tests administered by the league and administered by some teams, which have some people concerned. So the concerns are, it's nothing on the court. I think on the court, he's unique. He's a unicorn. You know what you're going to get, and it's a special player. There just is some risk with maybe some unknowns.
What team? Let's say he's going to go to one of the top 3. He's going to go to Orlando. He's going to go to Oklahoma City, or he's going to go to Houston. In your opinion, looking at their current rosters and who's coaching there, who's in better position to develop a guy like Chet Holmgren with who's on the roster that they can let him grow in the NBA?
I think OKC is the perfect fit. I think getting him at 2 would be amazing. So in Houston, again, a lot of young guards who can facilitate and get him the ball on the perimeter for sure. But they did trade 2 future firsts to go up and get Alperen Şengün in the mid-first round last year. So they have a guy that they've invested in who's young at the center position. Oklahoma City, they need defense, they need shooting, they need a big man. I mean, just checks all the boxes, and that's why I think he can go there, get minutes early, get impact early, and that's, I think, why the Thunder like him. And I also think that's why his camp and his agents want him to go there. It's just kind of a seamless fit, start to finish.
Derek, a lot of times we see some movement maybe with picks. Do you think with maybe Orlando kind of getting a little bit sweeter on Chet Holmgren recently? I know there's been talk about Sacramento moving out of the 4 spot. Do you think we see any of those high top 3, top 5 teams move out of their spots or try and move up? Maybe Oklahoma City move up to ensure they get Holmgren or something like that with all the assets they have down there?
I think 1 or 2 of them get moved. If I had to pick one, I think it's the 4th pick. And I don't know if it's maybe Sacramento moving up to get a guy they want now or moving back. My understanding is they have 4, 5, 6 solid offers and discussions around that number 4 pick to move. Pelicans, I think Blazers, Knicks, these are just a couple of the teams, Wizards as well, who are really interested in going and getting number 4. I think it's all for Jaden Ivey. At least that's my understanding, unless Houston were to not take Banchero and maybe go a different direction. But I think pick number 4, if any of them get moved, would be the one to do that.
Do you have a comp for Jaden Ivey?
if he really hits his ceiling, if it really, really clicks, you're looking at a mix between Dwayne Wade and Donovan Mitchell, where he can be on ball, but he doesn't have to have it. You can run him with the true point. You can run him with another combo or a shooting guard. It's that versatility that makes him so special, along with being 6'4", 200 pounds, and just one of the best athletes we've seen in years. The offense he was in at Purdue, you had two immobile 7-footers on the block at all times, and he was still able to get to the rim at will. When you open up the floor in an offense that goes 5 out with NBA spacing, he's going to be a real problem to deal with.
Derek, it seems like the consensus is of the top 3 is Jabari, Chet, and Paolo. But with a comp like that for Jaden Ivey, how big is the gap between those 3 guys and that next group that seems to include Ivey, Murray, and Mathurin?
So that's where I think the media, compared to what NBA front offices actually think, has been pretty wrong most of the year. There's been a big 4 this whole season, ever since December. Matt and I, we consult for a handful of teams, agencies, all this good stuff. And we have multiple general managers even today that have Jaden Ivey at 1 or 2. If they were picking 1 or 2, he's the guy. So it's definitely been a big 4 for, most of this season.
Hey, what you think and what people in your industry talk about, what's the thoughts on Sharp from Kentucky?
Very polarizing, and not from we like him and another team doesn't like him. It's from a standpoint of how much risk are you willing to take at a certain point in the lottery. I believe that Portland at 7 and New Orleans at 8 are all over him. I think that if I was to bet on it, those are one of the 2 spots he went or will go, if no picks are moved. I haven't talked to many teams that are confident and comfortable enough to trade up to, 4 or 5 to take him. Maybe that's some teams just doing a really, really good job of not showing their cards. But most, I believe, would take him in that 9 to 14 range. But Portland reportedly likes him a whole lot, and I think New Orleans does as well. So 7 to 14, I would put his range, but 7 to 8 if I had to bet on it. That's just kind of why he's pretty polarizing. Just how much risk can you take with a guy who hasn't played basketball in so long?
Derek, you've got a guy like Keegan Murray who's projected to go top 5, top 6, who a year ago was not really on the radar for that type of draft projection. Is there anyone besides Keegan Murray that's helped their draft stock as much or more in the past 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, I think Mathurin is a great one to look at. Almost came out last year. We actually updated our mock draft, shameless plug, on basketballnews.com about 10 minutes ago. So we are here in New York. We're here at the Westin at the team hotel. We updated this morning based on intel. We have Mathurin at 5 to Detroit. We have Keegan Murray going 6 to the Pacers. So Mathurin definitely comes to mind. I believe that Jalen Williams from Santa Clara is a junior, 6'5", 210 pounds, measured a plus 9-inch wingspan, just a stupid long wingspan, and then proceeds to jump a 39 at the combine. Just really shot up. I think in our very first mock, he was like 50 something. And as of today, we've got him at 16 to Atlanta. So I think he definitely is one that kind of came, I feel comfortable saying came out of nowhere, if you will. It has really, really risen.
Derek Murray joining us here on Sharp and Betting in the Morning. You follow Derek on Twitter at DMurrayHoops. And, of course, Basketball News with that updated mock bracket or that mock draft for the NBA draft, which is tomorrow night. Where does Bryce McGowan's fall in your projections?
McGowan's, I think, has a range from 25 to 40 based on my conversations. Okay. Right now we have him going to the Knicks at 42. That is just because we have some other players, primarily bigs, like Walker Kessler, Ismail Kamagate, Christian Koloko, that have really, really gained some fans in that early second round. But McGowan's, I think 25 to 40 is the range. Teams love his offensive potential in the NBA. 6'6", 6'7", long, lean frame, really good athlete, can finish above the rim, can get his own shot. Some of the knocks on him were the shot selection at Nebraska, and honestly, a lot of that has been dispelled. Look at the offense. It was tough to create a lot of times, and there were times during the games in the season where he was basically handed the ball and said, hey, this is your team to run. This is your offense right now. And quite frankly, when you have a freshman, you put him in that spot in a tough conference, we can look over some deficiencies, some inefficiencies. I don't think it hurts his projection at all into the league. So has a slim chance, I think, to be picked in the back end of the first, but early second round with that offensive upside is my guess right now.
Derek, is there anybody you're looking at in either the late lottery or just outside the lottery that you think has the upside for some superstar potential?
Yeah, I think Jaden Hardy is going to be a kid who will probably go in the 20s in this draft. And in 4 years, if we do a redraft exercise, he's probably going 10th. I understand he struggled for the Ignite, but when you look at this, he was an 18-year-old kid playing up against grown men. And over the last 8 games of the season, he shot nearly 40% from 3 on 10 attempts per game. He's probably one of the best pure shot makers and shot creators in this entire class. Some questions about feel for the game. Can he be a primary on-ball guy in spurts? I don't really know. He's probably the definition of a pure shooting guard, if you will. But Hardy is a guy to watch where it's difficult to get a grasp on his range, but pure talent. There was a reason that he was top 5 in his class coming out of high school.
You mentioned some 18-year-olds playing against grown men, which is what we see with the G League Ignite team. It's also what we see with a lot of these prospects coming out of Europe or other overseas places. How do you, I guess, kind of grade on a curve like that with either these G League teams or some of these European guys when you do have to take something like their level of competition against people that are twice their age in a consideration?
It's very difficult, honestly. If anybody tells you it's easy, I'll tell you they're lying. And, it used to just be, college and then, international where guys were coming out of the top leagues. And then you have the NBL that's really grown. That's a whole nother wrinkle. Now you have the Ignite, which is another wrinkle. And Overtime Elite. There's 2 Overtime Elite kids coming out that are draft eligible this year. And that's a whole nother world too, because they're technically playing against high school kids. So Montero and Dominic Barlow from OTE are difficult evals. I think for all of them, importance comes from getting there in person. Because as much as you need to get a feel for them in person, like I believe you need to with every prospect, you need to get a feel for the competition. The NBL is a little bit easier to grasp because you know what the league is. And the G League Ignite, honestly, you understand kind of the toughness of the G League as a whole because they're professionals. They're guys who are worthy of NBA contracts. So I'm not quite as hard on kids, and neither are a lot of NBA teams as far as inefficiency for Ignite. Overtime is the really, really tricky one right now.
What's your, and I keep asking you about guys that might be polarizing in the first round. What are your thoughts on Patrick Baldwin Jr.?
Yeah, Baldwin came in first mock draft or big board in November. He's probably late lottery, and honestly has had a real fall from grace. A lot of guys around the league are worried about his toughness and what that looks like. Now, his shooting stroke is as pure as they come. Beautiful release, beautiful mechanics. Probably going to shoot 40% from 3 in the league. But what does he do other than that? And it's not to say that there isn't value in that. If you're 6'10 and can shoot threes, you're going to play in the league for a very long time. But there are just some concerns about physical toughness. Is he willing to get in there and bang? Because the NBA, even with people, even my dad sometimes hits me with, I can't believe some of these fouls are being called fouls. The league is soft, all this kind of stuff. I hear it even from my family. But it's a war every single night. For guys, 6'7" and up, it's a war. And you have to be physically and mentally tough 82 times a year. And I think that's just one of the things yet to be seen about Baldwin.
Derek, we talked about Bryce McGowens and Patrick Baldwin here, high-profile guys who maybe didn't help themselves or actively hurt themselves stock-wise with their college seasons. Do you think that might serve as kind of a cautionary tale with high-profile high school guys going to non-blue blood programs in the future?
Yes, that will, as well as the fall. Fall, I guess I'll use loosely for Jaden Hardy. In our very first mock, Jaden Hardy was like 5th. And that's where the pure talent was there. And he gets knocked going to the Ignite because his competition was so tough that it almost made him look, quote, not as ready for the pros, which I actually believe shows the opposite because he's getting that competition. So it goes for the kids who play at Ignite where the competition is maybe way too steep for them. And then it also goes for the guys going to really small schools. There's pressure in both of those instances to perform really well, to dispel and knock out any question marks. And that's just difficult. And there's so many factors that go into it. I mean, Baldwin, who knows what he dealt with maybe in the locker room. Dad's the coach. Like, sometimes that's great. Sometimes it's not, for us who have had that before. And maybe there's just things that we don't know about and teams don't know about. So I won't say that the blue blood, program or lack thereof is what hurts kids, but even if it's not their fault, it is in a way held against them, like whether we like it or not.
Derek, we appreciate the conversation and enjoy the NBA draft in New York, and great stuff by you and the rest of your colleagues.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks so much for having me, guys.
You can follow Derek. That was he knows his stuff on the NBA draft. D. Murray Hoops. They will have a lot on basketball news coming up with the draft. My man Banchero, I can't get him to 1 or 2.
I don't think so. I don't think it's going to be. I like he's NBA ready now. I just don't think his upside is viewed quite as high as Jabari's or Chet's.
See, I think Jabari Smith is. Does
not.
He have a killer instinct?
I'm not totally sold. Although
can he create off the dribble?
Well, that's the big question, right? Is can he create his own shot? And if he can't, you're really taking a guy that can't create his own shot at number 1.
You might be on to Orlando with Holmgren.
I like Holmgren. Listen, I understand the bust potential is there. I'm not denying that. But if you're taking a swing at number 1, I'm taking a swing at a guy who can do something I've never seen before.
Brandon Vogel coming up next. Sharp and Ravi on a Wednesday, hump day. Double dip of baseball today. Oklahoma and Texas A&M. A little after 1. Oklahoma's 2-0. And then later tonight, Arkansas and Ole Miss. Ole Miss is 2-0. That's after 6. The weather here in Omaha going to be great again today. Should be another set of large crowds, Jell-O shots taken, and a juiced-up crowd, especially for the night game. And we'll have it all for you beginning now all the way through tonight's late game. We have for you now Brandon Vogel from Hail Varsity, the magazine, hailvarsity.com. Good Wednesday morning, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Wonderful. Thank you. We were discussing earlier because of SEC baseball, and right now there's stranglehold and trying to figure out who's going to break up what the SEC is doing. What they have done is they've taken their football money and the abundance of that cash, they've either put it back in their football programs. Some of their other sports, men's basketball has taken off with an influx of cash, but baseball has been a great benefit with facilities and coaches being paid large salaries. I mean, they've got $1 million coaches in baseball in the SEC. Ravi and I were talking, Brandon, when the Big Ten's extra cash from the TV deal kicks in, what do you think will be the general consensus of the 14 schools and their athletic directors that are handling the coffers? Where do you think they will send that extra money they're getting?
Probably goes back into football first and foremost. I mean, basketball in the Big Ten obviously operates at a high level collectively. So I think protecting that status for the conference would be high on the priority list. You know, volleyball kind of gets there naturally, and you know that's not really a sport where you make those kind of investments. I mean, like, how much higher could Big Ten volleyball possibly go? I think it almost becomes a little bit of an arms race with the SEC just to try and keep up on that football front. You know, baseball, the Big Ten could put all of its money towards that, and you know, just weather-wise, in terms of fan interest, like baseball in the South, college baseball in the South specifically, is an institution, and we see what those programs draw. And to try and compete for the best baseball players in the country, it's really hard when you see the setting at a place like Ole Miss or Tennessee, and you're, you know, Indiana or Iowa. So I'm guessing it makes the most sense for the Big Ten to stick most of that money back into football.
Brandon, we were talking about, you know, thinking outside the box a little bit here. I think we agree. You're probably right. It goes back into football or men's basketball. Could you see an investment even further into something that may be more regionally attractive to the Big Ten schools, like hockey programs, the way it was in the SEC with baseball?
That would be interesting, and I mean, I think it would be pretty smart, because you nailed it. Regional interest, the way that the SEC has that with sort of baseball. And I mean, baseball is a little bit more of it's less of a regional sport than, say, hockey is. But you know, if the Big Ten really made a push to, I don't know if you'll ever get, well, you probably won't ever get all 14 teams. But you could make a push to increase the number of hockey playing schools, and see what that gets you. You know, in college hockey, we've sort of seen, you know, in the past decade or two, I'm guessing, you know, this isn't my strong suit, but the rise of those Colorado colleges. It's a sport where I think with some real resources, well, even an Omaha would be an example of this. You can make a dent pretty quickly. So that's an intriguing idea.
Brandon Vogel joining us here on Sharp and Betting in the Morning. Let's shift to football and recruiting, because the month of June is going to wrap up and Nebraska is going to get, for the most part, some positive news and guys that they want, and we'll get some more decisions maybe before the end of the month and then early in July. But Hayden Moore becomes number 9 yesterday. What do you think his commitment means for the class of 23, where he's from and the position he plays?
Yeah, it was a good one to get, and I mean, I think they're checking a lot of their boxes at this point. I feel like they're a little bit ahead, and in this new era where you want to leave a little bit of room at the end just to deal with college football's crazy offseason when it comes to just player movement. Like, I feel like Nebraska's done a pretty good job. Last year felt a little bit strange from a recruiting perspective for me. It felt like they were kind of constantly behind, and you had this. You knew there was a lot of change coming in the off season. So now I feel like they're a little bit more caught up in that, Colorado range. It's right on the fringe of, the 500-mile radius. Nebraska's had some good success lately with players from Colorado. And I think the thing I like most about recruiting so far for the month of June for the Huskers is that this is kind of the sweet spot. When they get guys in this range, say late May to early July, they really end up becoming, I think, the core of these Nebraska classes based on, what I've kind of looked back in the past. So these are the guys that you can usually count on to stick. Yeah, you get those way early commits and it's a little bit more volatile. And then, you get those commits the week before the early signing period. Those get a little bit dicey in the past as well. So this is the time for Nebraska to gain some ground, and I feel like they have.
Brandon, how close is Nebraska to where they would either want or need to be from a recruiting class standpoint before they kick their season off?
I would think they're pretty close. So the class is at 9 now, and with the rule change, like I feel like there's some flexibility with class size that maybe wouldn't have been there on paper prior to that. I think, if they could add 3 or 4 more. So if you go into the season with 13 or 14 commits, I think that leaves you in a pretty good spot to have addressed a good amount of your needs, maybe gotten top or near the top of the list, a couple of guys for them, and then have that flexibility to move on some players once they actually start playing football at the high school level. So I think that 13, 14, 15 range would be ideal. And I think maybe not 15, but they've got a chance to get there before they head to Ireland.
Brandon Vogel joining us here. Let's talk a little bit of big picture Big Ten. And we can say breakout programs. Success is, we all know, it's sometimes very hard to replicate if you've not got a track record where you just keep churning year after year. And that path can be difficult if you have a really good season and you lose some guys to the NFL, you lose some guys to the portal. More likely, in your opinion, to replicate the success they had last year, Michigan State or Purdue?
Michigan State, Purdue's two departures post spring football. The one at safety, and I guess Milton Wright wasn't a departure technically, but he's not going to be available. That's pulled me down a little bit on what I thought was possible for Purdue, and also they lost their defensive coordinator off the defense that kind of quietly did some really good things a year ago. So. And then you factor in the expected attrition of just 2 of the best players in the Big Ten, in Dave Bell and George Karlaftis. So I think Purdue, they're still going to be tough. They're still probably going to be a bowl team. I don't see them as a 9-win team again. I don't see Michigan State as a 10 wins in the regular season team this year either. I would expect them to come back to the pack a little bit, but not as much as Purdue based on developments in West Lafayette this spring.
And I think some people, when they look at Purdue, and you also lose David Bell as well. So Aiden O'Connell might be really talented, but he's going to have new pass catchers. Their losses, and good on them. They had a good season last year, but they had big losses to Notre Dame, Wisconsin, and Ohio State. I mean, they, on an average, they lost by almost 3 touchdowns to all of them. The closest, I think, was the 2-touchdown loss to Notre Dame. You've done this. We've all done this in close games, 1-score games. So Purdue last year, they were 3-1 in 1-score games. Now those 1-score wins were Illinois, Nebraska, and Tennessee. And those 3 teams had a combined record that was below 500. So if you're looking at a team last year, because you could bring Nebraska into this conversation with records in one-score games. How likely is that it flips back to the other side, or it stays the same? Like, you win close games one year, helps your success. All of a sudden, you're on the radar. You're going to win close games again. Do you buy into the notion that if you win close games, it has a tendency to go back to the norm if you've not done that before? And do you think that you can flip it the other way?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's regression to the mean, whether negative or positive. So in Purdue's case, if they were to come down to 2-2 or 1-3 in those kind of games in 2023, they would be moving towards the mean. If Nebraska got closer to 500, it would be the same. And over a large enough sample size, that definitely does happen. So yes, I believe in it. It's a big part of how I look at teams in the off season. That's one of the first things I look at and say, okay, well, does their record accurately reflect how good this team actually was? And when you have some of those a bunch of one-score wins or a bunch of one-score losses, it definitely factors into how I assess those teams. That said, there's no guarantee it flips, year one to year two. You can go on these runs, and sometimes that just happens. I think in the Big Ten West, it's particularly important, and it's kind of why Nebraska is where it's at entering this season, is outside of Wisconsin and probably Iowa. Like, I can put those two up at least over the past 4 years and say, okay, those are probably the two best teams in the Big Ten West. Everything below that, so like the Minnesotas, the Purdue's, Nebraska, Northwestern, special seasons for those programs tend to be defined by, going on a 3-1 run or even better, or doing what Nebraska did in the negative. So it's the nature of the division a little bit, I think, unless you can really get to a level of consistency, which only Wisconsin and Iowa are really doing at this point.
Brandon, considering some of the similarities between how Michigan State turned things around last year and how Nebraska is trying to turn things around this year, how closely should Nebraska fans be watching Michigan State's progression this year, coming off of a season that Nebraska hopes in some ways to replicate last year?
I think it's worth paying pretty close attention to it because, Michigan State is one of those teams that we were sort of just talking about a second ago. Did pretty well in close games. And Mel Tucker, a lot of credit to him, at least from me. I think that's part of his philosophy. Heard him talk multiple times about dragging teams into the deep end and beating them there just because they were better prepared to do that. There might be something to that, but when I look at Nebraska, and I don't even know why I'm worried about like 2 seasons down the road, but I am. I look at this, and you look at how the schedule looks now and the additions they've made. Like, I think it's probable that Nebraska gets to at least 6 wins, which I think is enough to continue this current tenure with this coaching staff. Could be wrong about that. But if they do, like, if they get to that, are those games going to be earned? Which is sort of the question I have with Michigan State. I don't mean that to take anything away from the season that they had last year, but Kenneth Walker went from a guy who was in the mix at Wake Forest to the Doak Walker Award winner. So it just, I worry about the sustainability of that. So for me personally, I'm watching the Spartans really closely in 2022.
They were 4-0 in one-score games as well. Nebraska, Indiana, the Michigan game, and then Penn State. They were 4-0, and I think they had a +3 turnover margin in those games, as I recall. The thing about the portal, and Nebraska has got into it for the 22 season. What happens to Michigan State if the players they've added in the portal this year don't have the same kind of Kenneth Walker season?
That's kind of the question for me, and I think they'll still be pretty good, and they'll still be a tough out for most teams. They might end up 8-4 instead of the 10-2. And I think it's that kind of difference because they still should be pretty good. They got the quarterback back. They've got a couple of good receivers. That passing game was pretty explosive. Defensively, I think they should be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think Mel Tucker is a really good coach. So they could be, however you wanted to measure this, as good as last year, just with a worse record. And that to do that, you probably need to maybe not have hits like Kenneth Walker level hits in the transfer portal, but you can't have many misses. That's kind of the double-edged sword of going that heavy into the portal, and it's something I guess we'll watch play out with Nebraska this season.
Not named a quarterback on that thought to get you out of here. The top 3 must be hits out of the portal for Nebraska. Not named Casey Thompson or Purdy. We'll just leave the quarterback position out of it.
Okay. I'll put Palmer there. Though really, if Garcia Castaneda or somebody, but we'll go with Palmer at wide receiver. I think they need somebody to emerge there. Defensive line, they need one there, and I think and more than O'Shawn Mathis, I'm thinking one of the interior guys probably needs to hit there, and let's see. I'll go with Tommy Hill in the secondary. Nebraska's got some other options outside of him, but if he is a hit for them, I think that increases Nebraska's defensive ceiling overall.
Great stuff, Brandon. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys.
That's Brandon Vogel from Hale Varsity. What Mel Tucker, the electricity that he put into the Michigan State program, he's a recruiting juggernaut.
Oh, yeah.
And he also is fantastic on social media.
I mean,
with a big cigar.
You get the SEC vibe from him, which makes sense considering where he came from. But there's guys that just feel like the SEC, and Mel Tucker kind of feels like one of those guys.
Well, and again, we're speaking of baseball. Once you've been there and you understand, you use that model. Urban Meyer left Gainesville, came 100%. To Columbus.
Yeah.
He used the same exact model to turn Ohio State, which you alluded to way back in the first hour, is the closest anybody in the Big Ten is to what the SEC operation is for football, for the way you build it and the way you perform. Well, where did it start? Guy came from the SEC to Columbus and said, this is how we have to operate if we want to win national championships. You can do what you were doing because you were winning in the Big Ten.
Sure.
But I'm not here to win in the Big Ten. I'm here to win national championships. And this is how you do it. And that's Tucker. He tried it at Colorado. Now, they don't have the resources or the passion for football that he's now getting in East Lansing. I mean, we've kind of forgotten that he got that massive contract last season.
Because people thought he was going to go to LSU. Unlike baseball, you can replicate some of the football things from the SEC to the Big Ten, right? Because you do have the passion for it. You do have the regional interest. You have the resources as well. I will say, though, I think you bring up a really good point with, hey, you were doing this and it worked in the Big Ten. Well, we're not concerned about it working in the Big Ten. I think there's too many teams still in the Big Ten that are worried only about it working in the Big Ten, right? There's a lot of, and you kind of get this with the weird Rose Bowl stuff and how the Big Ten is the most important thing in the world. It's not. If you're not competing for national championships in today's college football, you are irrelevant. And it feels like too many of the Big Ten teams are worried about competing for the Big Ten and not worried enough about, hey, let's try and win national championships. Obviously, that's what Urban Meyer came in and said, hey, I don't care about the Big Ten. I care about the big one. And it doesn't feel like a lot of other Big Ten teams are going for it. It seems like Mel Tucker's going for it. I don't know if it'll work at Michigan State, but at least he's going for it.
Well, Michigan is like they're
kind of no man's land.
Yeah, because they are built to win the Big Ten, but they can be built to win a national championship.
They have the brand and the recognition to be able to win national
and they
titles.
have enough talent, but they found out the difference between elite Big Ten talent and elite college football talent when they played Georgia in the playoff.
There's a difference. There's a gap there for sure. And listen, That was a particularly talented Georgia team.
Playoffs.
I mean, there's been lesser talented teams win national titles than the Georgia team we had last year, with about half of their defense going in the first round of the NFL draft. But there was a gap between Michigan and Georgia, and it was pretty apparent.
That's Robbie. I'm Gary Shane here as well. Sharp and Betting in the morning. Coming up in the next hour, we'll get the latest on Ole Miss and Oklahoma, the 2-2-0 teams. When we come back, Rob Gronkowski has retired for how long? And when he does officially retire, does he walk to Canton?
He might limp to Canton.
Yeah, no kidding.
Think about, I got a great stat on Rob Gronkowski. With all the injuries that he had, how the career could have been even better over 11 years.
It's true. He missed a lot of time.
He did. He is in rarefied air
already.
Yeah. Some will say that he's the best tight end of all time.
Who, I don't know if, I think he might have been
I'm sorry, the Mike Ditka's, John Mackey.
Yeah, I'll pass on those guys for now. He might have been the most dominant in his prime. I don't know if he's got the career resume to be the greatest.
But he's part of, and there's still a couple of guys that are left in the NFL that are the top two tight ends. One plays in Kansas City, the other plays in San Francisco. It is the evolution of the tight end in the game of football on what the tight end looks like.
It's totally, I mean, he kind of was on the cutting edge of it, right? You had like Tony Gonzalez, Antonio Gates before him, and then Rob Gronkowski kind of brought in this new era even further of these tight ends that have done things that I don't think people ever thought tight ends could do.
Well, Travis Kelce, he's got, 6 straight 1,000-yard receiving
Travis
seasons?
Kelce, you mentioned Kittle the same way. People look at tight ends completely differently than they did 10, 15 years ago.
Isn't it interesting? Those two guys who I think are the top two tight ends in the NFL, I like Mark Andrews.
Mark Andrews is really good.
But one is going to, what's it going to be like for him without Tyreek Hill? And the other, what's it going to be like for George Kittle with Trey Lance at quarterback?
I think it's better. I think tight ends really benefit from mobile quarterbacks because they end up being the guys that are open a lot on those scrambles. I think Kittle with Trey Lance could go really, really well.
We will discuss Rob Gronkowski and what his future may be coming up as he retired from the NFL yesterday after 11 years. 8:28, Sharp and Betting in the morning at 1620 The Zone. Hey, when we're looking for that car, truck, or SUV, you don't want to spend a lot of time going all over town, searching here and there. You do your research, and you have a good idea of what you want. Well, how about doing your research at one place that is easily accessible? That is woodhouse.com. They make it easy on you to find that car, truck, or SUV. It's all right there at woodhouse.com. Now, Woodhouse, which has been serving the great community since 1975, just welcoming more and more members of the family. Raise my hand. I'm a member of the Woodhouse family. They've got 18 brands across 16 metro locations. So they've got plenty of options for you, whatever you're looking for, from the top of the line popular truck brands to the luxury vehicles and everything else you can find in Woodhouse. Well, find it online at woodhouse.com. They've showcased their vehicles. I was there recently. You can see everything that is on the lot you're going to see online. Yeah, you don't have to go to the lot. You can go online first and then go from there. But do it today. Take advantage of one-stop shopping, easily accessible, one place, woodhouse.com. little bit ago, we talked to Derek Murray, most notably of basketball news about the NBA draft. There are, after the top 5 or 6, and it gets kind of interesting as you finish up the lottery, but there are some polarizing players in the first round that may actually fall out of the first round. It's you've described this before. I've heard you talking about the draft and how we consume college basketball, how we consume the NBA, and then there's the other element of how we consume the NBA draft.
Yeah, they're all different.
Because some people will say, well, I watched, and Banchero's going to go in the top 3.
Yes.
Okay, guy went to Duke, got to the Final Four, averaged nearly 19 a game. Why isn't he the number 1 guy compared to Jabari Smith? There's that part of it. Then there is the discussion about 2 guys that are very polarizing, but one has gotten a lot of momentum in the last 3 weeks, and that's Sharp. We asked Derek about that. And then Patrick Baldwin Jr. If you watch both of them play, one, you didn't see a lot of them because one was injured and the other just, played 11 games maybe?
Yeah, and all those 11 games felt like they were in Siberia.
Yes.
Playing at Milwaukee with his dad there. It's a really interesting – those 2 guys are a really interesting case study for me because they were both top 8 recruits coming out of high school, so in that same range, right? And it seems like Shaedon Sharpe is being – that seems like he's being rewarded for choosing not to play any basketball last year. And I'm not one of those guys like, oh, you got to play college basketball, whatever. Go to G League, go to Overtime Elite, go do whatever you want. Go to the NBL. I don't care. But you shouldn't be rewarded for not playing any basketball whatsoever. And he wasn't injured. He just chose not to play. Whereas Patrick Baldwin played some, got hurt, but has fallen like a rock out of the first round. There's a couple places that still have him in the late 20s. As you mentioned, Derek Murray, we were just talking to at basketballnews.com, has him at 41. So him and Bryce McGowan going back-to-back in their mock draft. The Ringer NBA, who does terrific draft stuff, has him in the 40s as well. It's part of the reason I asked that question to Derek is, okay, if Patrick Baldwin had gone to any blue blood, Duke, Kentucky, Kansas, North Carolina, wherever, and even either not played or not been good, we've seen guys go to these blue bloods, play, and be totally unimpressive and still get drafted in the first round based on their high school stock. There's really no advantage to do what Bryce McGowan did or to do what Patrick Baldwin did. I'm not bringing McGowan's up as much in this conversation because he wasn't ranked quite as highly as these guys, even though he was obviously still very highly touted. But what is the upside of going somewhere off the beaten path as a high value recruit? There's really not one because we've seen it with Kentucky a million times. Guys don't play at all, or they play some, don't play other, whatever. We've seen it with a few of their big guys in the last few. Enes Kanter is a great example. He had other issues where he was eligibility issues. But if you don't play, you hurt your stock less than if you go somewhere and struggle outside of a power conference. Because if you go to Kentucky, be like, he's playing high level basketball. He's just adjusting a little bit. We trust what we saw in high school. You go to Milwaukee and you struggle, you find yourself in the second round really fast.
This seems like the Manny Ramirez comment yesterday about Derek Jeter, that he'd just be a regular guy in Kansas City. I know it's a little bit different on maybe you think it's a reach, but in terms of your stock goes up, like let's say, for example, Bryce McGowan's played at, I think it's State and played at South Carolina, but let's say he goes to a place like Duke.
Sure.
We're not saying, well, he might be 25 to 40. We're probably on that kind of a season. And
if he had put up the same numbers,
he would be a definite lottery pick.
100%. Even let's say he went to Michigan State. Big Ten. We'll stay in the Big Ten. Goes to Michigan State. Let's say he goes to Iowa or Wisconsin. If he goes to a good Big Ten team and puts up even 80% of the numbers he put up, he's a lottery pick. There is so little benefit. If you're a potential one and done guy, there is so little benefit to going somewhere that's not a blue blood. There's just nothing to gain there.
Nope.
Even with Nebraska in a Power 5 situation, right? You get to show your skills against the best teams in the country. But And that's better than the situation Patrick Baldwin's dealing with, because really Bryce McGowan's is about in the same spot that his recruiting ranking was last year, right? He didn't lose a ton of ground because he produced at a Power 5 level. If you aren't going to at least a Power 5 school, and more likely a Power 5 blue blood, you have to dominate. And listen, I'm going to throw Gonzaga in there because they've proven themselves as a power conference basketball team, even though they're not a power conference basketball team.
Suggs and Holmgren back to back.
Exactly. They've got a track record of playing against the best. But even going to Gonzaga, if Chet Holmgren doesn't produce what he produced at Gonzaga, he's not going number 1, 2, 3 overall. But if he had gone to Duke, Kentucky, North Carolina and struggled, he's probably still a top 5, top 10 pick.
So let's just play I'll grab one mock draft.
Yeah.
Auburn, Gonzaga, Duke, Purdue, Iowa, Arizona, Kentucky, Duke, Wisconsin, Baylor, Memphis, Ohio State, national champion KU, Duke, Kentucky. Auburn's in there as well. Bruce Pearl will have a good day. Bruce Pearl and Chris Holtman will have big nights tomorrow night.
Look at the teams that aren't power teams.
So will Scott Drew.
You've got Jalen Williams at Santa Clara. That's one. Again, I'm counting Gonzaga as a power team because they're a number 1 seed every year. I mean, I don't think there's an argument there. You've got the only guy outside of Jalen Williams, the first one on the board that I'm looking at that's not either Jalen Williams or international / G League is David Roddy at Colorado State at 30.
Mm-hmm.
There's no value to going somewhere else. And listen, we cover Creighton. I love Creighton. But if you're a potential lottery type guy, if you're a 2, 3, 4 year guy, a place like Creighton makes sense. Some of these other places make sense. Jalen Williams, for example, he's a junior coming out, right? He's not a one and done. He wasn't one of these guys coming out of high school. If you're not an obvious one and done potential guy, it opens up your options quite a bit more. David Roddy, a junior coming out of Colorado State. If you have a chance to go one and done, why on earth would you go anywhere outside of a blue blood school?
I'm with you.
It doesn't make any sense. You get the benefit of the doubt to a level that is probably not fair. Because listen, I have huge reservations about Shaedon Sharpe. I have no idea what that guy is. I've heard the workouts haven't been that great either. But because he was at Kentucky, because he was where he was coming out of high school, people are still enamored with him.
I'll give you a guy that can get into the conversation here. Ty Washington.
100%.
Because, okay, let's say he does stick with his commitment, comes to Creighton, and has the year that he has, which was very uneven.
Yeah, up and down.
He didn't know when he was playing.
Got banged up a little bit.
So he is at a program that has a solid history of producing guards, from Booker to Murray to Fox and throw in Hero.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, benefit of the doubt a little bit.
100%.
Ty Washington is top 20. He's like 15 to 20 range, probably.
I would guarantee first round for him. And he was a late riser high school. He wasn't even in the top 20 of high school rankings until very late after he had signed with Kentucky. When Creighton signed him, he was in the 40s or 50s, right? So he shoots up recruiting boards. But a guy like Ty Washington, you make a great point. You go to Creighton, and so you're basically switching out Ty Washington for Trey Alexander. Let's say Ty Washington has the exact same year that he had at Creighton that he did at Kentucky. He's not a first-round pick. He's just not. He doesn't get the benefit of the doubt, even though Creighton has done a pretty good job of producing some NBA talent in the last handful of years. He doesn't get a first-round grade. Now listen, a year from now,
different.
When Creighton's probably going to be really, really good and have a ton of marquee matchups, maybe his stock is even better. Maybe he's a lottery pick. So there are situations where it makes sense. And that's why I think he was committed to Creighton originally, because he wasn't going to be in that one and done conversation. And if you're not in that one and done conversation, places like Creighton make a ton of sense.
So if you have Robbie as your agent and you're a up and comer prep star, you know where you're going.
Listen, I'm gonna get you. It's the John Calipari recruiting pitch. Hey, we may not win a national title. You will be in the NBA.
Mm-hmm. I mean, look at what I just rattled off: Devin Booker, Jamal Murray.
Devin Booker didn't even
De'Aaron
start
Fox.
at Kentucky.
Yeah. Tyler Hero.
The Harrison twins, who aren't even that good.
Wow. Remember that stretch? The hype around both of those guys?
Yeah, they both started over Booker, and neither one of them are as good.
I mean, but you have Calipari with guards has a great track record.
Calipari with guards, Calipari with bigs. I mean, Calipari with just about anybody has a great track record of getting you to the NBA.
But now they become a point at Kentucky. It's been a while that they want a national title. I don't want to have we're winning a national title on Thursday night of the NBA draft. That's the balance that you have.
Sure.
To try and every year find the right formula to win a national title with all of that talent instead of every year after year.
That's the sneaky thing that we've seen in this one and done era, right? It doesn't really translate to national titles. That's the sneaky thing. Is like, yeah, you can win signing day, but that's probably the last time you'll be ranked number one at the end of something.
Huh? All right, 8:45. Coming up next hour, we'll dive into a little Oklahoma and Ole Miss baseball. They're both 2-0. When we come back, we'll dive into this discussion of tight ends because Kelsey Kittle 1-2. I like Mark Andrews. There's Waller in the conversation as well of the current tight ends that are the best in the NFL because maybe the best ever just retired yesterday in Rob Gronkowski. We'll get into that when we turn at Sharp and Betting in the morning at 1620 The Zone. So the guy that brought us 69 jokes brought us other things. Rob Gronkowski retired yesterday after 11 years, 9 in New England, 2 with Tampa Bay. Plenty of rings, plenty of records, plenty of injuries. Would anybody be surprised mid to late October, Tampa Bay is scuttling a little bit. Cameron Brate he doesn't have any help at tight end. The two guys that they drafted in the draft this year aren't helping out. The Tom Brady calls up Gronk and says, "Hey, are you in shape? Do you want to play half the season? You don't want to go through training camp. You don't want to go through the rigors of the first part of the season. How are you doing? Are you healthy? Are you still keeping your weight? Do you want to come back and play?" Would anybody be surprised if Tampa Bay was in a position to make a run and Tom Brady said to a guy that never heard, he's got a personality, but he was never embarrassed a franchise or himself off the field with anything.
No.
And a good locker room guy. You never heard anybody go, "Man, that guy
seems to be a good teammate."
Yeah, he's
a frat boy, but he keeps his nose clean in terms of, there's no scandals with Rob Gronkowski.
He is everything is advertised. That if Brady said, "Hey, are you in shape? Do you want to come back and play?" Anybody surprised if mid to late October Gronk would say, "Oh yeah, I'm there"?
Yeah, they're putting him on the Roger Clemens, just keep your phone on plan.
I mean, why not? If he stays in shape, and there's probably every reason to believe that he will. Now, the year that he was out, he
lost a lot of weight.
Yeah. So that would be the biggest thing.
That's the biggest issue. I don't think he's
still work out, still lift in case.
And eat enough to keep the weight on. That would be the big issue for Gronk, is just keeping the weight on. He naturally is not as big as he plays football at. But yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all. I mean, listen, I know him and Brady are obviously super tight. I'd be surprised if he sent the paperwork in yet. That's all I'm saying.
Has there ever been a caliber of player like that in the NFL to come back twice? I mean, that you can even think of.
Brett Favre came back like every other week. I don't know.
I
don't know if he actually officially retired twice, but
right.
I hope Gronkowski, and this will be the push because that's where all former players go, is television. I didn't like him on television. I didn't like him when he's with Fox. I believe he still is tied into Fox. I didn't like him on the set. No, I don't think he'd be good in the booth.
You have to do something different with a guy like Gronk, right? His personality is interesting, but it's not made for the current formula of studio shows and broadcast booths. That's why I thought what they did with the Mannings has been so interesting, right? Because obviously, especially Peyton, I don't think Eli's that interesting, although throw some jabs out there every once in a while that are funny. He mostly just makes fun of Peyton, which is his value to the show there. But Peyton probably could be a pretty solid color commentator in the NFL in a traditional broadcast booth, but he's so much more interesting in the role they gave him. I think you kind of have to, if you want Rob Gronkowski to bring value to your platform, you have to invent something for Rob Gronkowski to do that probably doesn't exist right now.
And I think the stuff that you see that him and Brady do, that's the best content that he creates.
Yes.
Just natural.
Yeah. You need a place where he's not having to be buttoned up.
And I don't think he wants to break down games.
No. He wants to have fun and tell stories.
Yeah. Go places. Go hang out with teammates, players that are in the league, interview him.
Honestly, you might be better off having him do almost an NFL game day version type thing. The way that they do college game day, goes to different places, meets people, interviews people, eats whatever he wants to. That to me seems like a better fit for a guy like Gronk than, hey, let's break down what they're doing here on third and whatever.
He was uncomfortable.
That's not his personality. It never has been.
So let me give you a little nugget here. He retires at the age of 33. Many are going to consider him the best tight end of all time. I'm a little biased towards Tony Gonzalez, and there's Antonio Gates, there's Sharp, there's Witten, there's Winslow. I never saw Mackey or Ditka play, but they are probably in a lot of people's top 10. I saw the tail end of Ozzie Newsome's career, but look at Gronkowski. 11 years in the NFL. This is a stat I ran across this morning. 621 catches, 92 touchdowns. That kind of production, only Rice, Moss, T.O., and Marvin Harrison have had.
None of those guys are tight ends.
No, that's 4 elite wide receivers. And remember all of the games that Gronkowski missed due to injury.
So I don't know if you can call him, I hinted at this earlier, I don't know if you can call him the greatest tight end of all time because I don't think he has the length of resume that a guy like Gates or that Gonzalez has, but he may have been the most dominant player ever at that position when he was healthy and in his prime. because there was no stopping him when he was right.
Mm-hmm.
There might not have been a more lethal weapon in all of football than Rob Gronkowski when he was good.
A lot of those guys you mentioned, Ozzie Newsome, I mean, they had careers before the time that they were really even like putting the tip of your toe into the water, as in, just the tip of just trying to get them the ball as much. I mean, look at Todd Christensen. That wasn't until like 85, 86 where he got over 1,000 yards. So, and they were already past their career by, 3/4 of the way. So, and then after that, it was, they had that another gap. So, I mean, I hate to say it's a new, but it's uncharted water that we've been in. So
shout out Dave Casper in Raider Nation.
Yeah, Dave Casper
it's
too.
It's really difficult to compare guys from eras prior to Tony Gonzalez, because the targets just weren't there.
Well, okay, so Shannon Sharp was.
Oh, that's a good one.
So, but he was a lot of the times you would talk about Sharp and you would say elite blocker.
Mm-hmm.
And then he started later in his career, started to evolve to where we are now with the tight end of how important they are in the offense. But the Tony Gonzalez and the Antonio Gates, that's the kind of time where the tight end position changed. But also with Gronkowski, and I think about this when we look at professional athletes and we try and think, okay, are they Hall of Fame?
Mm-hmm.
Rob Gronkowski is just like Aaron Donald. 3-4 years in the league, you knew they were going to be in the Hall of Fame.
No brainer.
And you didn't have to wait till the end of their career
One
to go,
of the most...
oh, okay, maybe first ballot. You knew with Gronkowski, definitely the first couple of years,
yes,
with the way that Brady helped him, but the talent that Gronkowski had, that guy's going to the Hall of Fame.
Well,
and you would say if he stayed healthy,
didn't even have to stay that healthy, to be honest. The other thing that I think deserves mentioning with Gronk, and Shane brought it up with the blocking, he was, when healthy, considered an elite blocker at that position, whereas some of the other real pass-heavy tight ends are not really considered. I mean, they're passive blockers at best.
Yep.
I think Kittle really gets after the blocking for San Francisco, which is obviously a huge portion of their run game. But that's the thing that I think separates Gronkowski from a lot of these guys, is he was a complete tight end. He did the whole job. He wasn't just a glorified receiver or, kind of an interior receiver. He did the whole job as well as anybody.
First ballot?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it's close.
Yes.
Right there.
Well, he could come back for another year.
Yeah.
I'll say it depends on, when that first ballot is going to be up in the air, because I'm not sure if he's actually done.
But I am with you. I think he is a first ballot. And he's got a resume that could slide Tony Gonzalez off of the number one spot.
Yeah, he's about the only guy.
I don't want to put. I say Tony Gonzalez. I don't know if you have.
I think so. I mean, I think you have to consider the historical contribution of Tony Gonzalez as well in terms of redefining the position of tight end. That matters to me.
Here is Donnie to finish the hour. Donnie, good morning.
Good morning, guys. How are you?
Good.
Now, Gary, I know you and I are about the same wheelhouse age-wise. I see Gronk more of a Mark Bavaro type, that big blocker, no real finesse. I'm just going to punch you in the mouth, and I'm going to catch anything that's thrown in my general direction. Does that sound fair?
Gosh, I can see where you're going with the blocking and the catching ability. I don't know. Bavaro never struck me as a great tight end, like with an elite tight end. Just a really good NFL tight end.
And when you guys were talking about where Gronk is going to end up, unfortunately, I think for the last, every ad that this guy has done, he perpetuates the big dumb, I'm just a big dumb animal kind of thing. And I think that's kind of a one-trick pony. And I think it would be okay for maybe one season where he goes on there and he laughs at himself. I don't think anybody would take him seriously, just personally. And I think that there's a really good chance, because he's already dipped his toe in the water, that he's going to end up. He's got a bunch of friends that are trainers at WWE.
Yep.
And there's a chance that he could end up at AEW or one of the professional wrestling companies.
That wouldn't surprise me. Donnie, thank you.
Have a great day.
Matt says Dallas Clark.
Oh, Dallas Clark's a good one.
Definitely top 20.
Yeah,
all-time tight ends.
Yeah, he's not in the same neighborhood as Gronk though. Had a really nice career for sure, but not in the same neighborhood.
How did Shane? How did we miss WWE being in Lincoln the other night? I didn't realize Vince McMahon made an appearance in Lincoln.
Might be his last appearance for a little while. He's
oh my gosh,
a little hot water there.
That was a big deal. That should have gotten more attention.
Yeah, no kidding.
We'll give attention to the College World Series coming up next.
Sharp and Benning in the morning on 1620 The Zone, 1620thezone.com, and the 1620 The Zone app. Here are Gary Sharp and Ravi Lula.
In the air to left. Pretty well hit. Gregory looking up. That ball is gone. A home run. Tim Elko. 2-0. And this one's lined to right. Pretty well hit. Going back is Lanzilli. At the track. At the wall. It is gone. Calvin Harris. His second home run of the year and a 2-run bomb makes it 8-3 Ole Miss.
Calvin Harris from Eastern Iowa made the 700-mile trip to go to college and play baseball at Ole Miss, and he's back home or closer to home playing in the College World Series. Ole Miss, they haven't lost yet since the postseason began for the NCAA, the regional, the super, and twice here in Omaha in the College World Series, and they're just one win away from playing into the championship series as well. We welcome in from the Clarion Ledger, Nick Suss. Nick, thanks for your time. First of all, welcome to Omaha. Now, welcome to the show.
Yeah, happy to help out, y'all.
Hey, we have, as we've gotten to know Ole Miss and the way the season has unfolded from what the expectations were at the beginning of the year to most recently the series at Fayetteville and 7-14 in the league, and then the turnaround just to get into the tournament and then take off. Part of the discussion has been, what would have happened if Ole Miss wouldn't have made the tournament? In your opinion, how much of a, I don't know, is it a hot seat for a guy that's had success and been there a long time, was there for Mike Bianco at the tail end of the season?
Yeah, I think Mike Bianco had quite a hot seat. I don't necessarily know if the decision would have been made, but I think that anyone who wasn't preparing for the possibility was kind of missing the point. I mean, there was some fan pressure, and as you guys know, with the social media era, fan pressure could be a very, very vocal minority, or it could be a rounder plurality. Who knows? But I do think that there was some fan pressure, and I do think that there was a weird taste left behind when he interviewed for the LSU job last year, and I think that a lot of fans are past that now when you're one game away from the College World Series championship series. But there was a lot of factors going in there, and I am a firm believer that he is essentially the same coach he was 4 weeks ago when this team was on the bubble and fans were worried they wouldn't make the NCAA tournament. And I don't think that 7 games necessarily changes who you are as a coach, but I do think that 22 years is a really long track record to show that there's a reason why he has the 3rd most wins in SEC baseball history and why he has shattered just about every single Ole Miss coaching record there is. So I don't know. I think that there would have been talks. I think that there's a strong possibility there would have been some kind of movement, whether it was among assistant coaches or among Bianco himself. But I think now it is pretty safe to say that's not going to happen.
Nick, for people that maybe aren't familiar with the trajectory of this Ole Miss season, obviously there were a lot of expectations coming into the year. In your opinion, where did things go off the rails kind of initially, and then how did they get that back on track to get where they are now?
Yeah, short version of this is they were number 1 in the country in the middle of March, and then they ran into Tennessee, and Tennessee beat the snot out of them 3 games in a row, and it kind of derailed this team. They struggled to find success from starting pitchers. In early April, Bianco abandoned the concept of starting pitchers entirely, and for 3 or 4 weeks just threw guys out depending on matchups and didn't have specific roles granted to people. Then as they were doing that, they kind of discovered Dylan DeLucia and Hunter Elliott as starting pitchers, and that really was the first key to solving and unlocking this team's potential. And then as late as the Coral Gables Regional, this offense, which was one of the most talented in the country in the preseason and returned 8 starters from the SEC's highest scoring offense a year ago, kind of figured out how to get the timely hits that they need. There were a lot of games this year where I think it was 9 times in SEC play they brought the tying or go-ahead runner to the plate in the 9th inning or later, and they lost 8 of those 9 games. Now, since then, Ole Miss has been absolutely lights out with runners in scoring position late, with getting those timely hits, with getting those go-ahead hits. And now not only have they been tying the score, not only have they been taking narrow leads, they've been putting the game away. And that was kind of the final piece. And they started discovering how to do that late in the year, certainly, but for sure in the NCAA tournament, and that's kind of unlocked the potential of a team that I think was preseason number 3. It's not a surprise that this team's here. It's just a surprise the trajectory they took.
Nick Suss from the Clarion Ledger joining us, talking Ole Miss baseball. Ole Miss takes on Arkansas tonight. Arkansas will need 2 victories to get to the championship series. Ole Miss just needs 1. We have learned more about Tim Elko, and he said, don't let the Rebs get hot. Got hot, and we see the result. But he also, you hear people clamoring for him and hollering and recognizing him on the streets when Ole Miss isn't playing at Charles Schwab Field. Can you explain to our listeners, covering this program on a daily basis, living in the area, how much of a folk hero Tim Elko has become over the last couple of years in Oxford?
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend that everybody in Nebraska is going to know the story, so I'll try and tell the story real quick. Last March of 2021, Tim Elko was named the National Player of the Month. He was unbelievably hot in March of 2021. On April 5th, 2021, Tim Elko tore his ACL. He opted not to get surgery for the possibility that he could maybe come back towards the end of the season. Less than 30 days later, I believe it was May the 3rd, somewhere around there, he comes back as a pinch hitter. And he pops up, and it's a big story, and everybody's happy, but he pops up. About a week later, he comes back in a pinch hitting capacity and hits a 3-run home run. And then he just keeps hitting home runs. I think he hit 9 or 10 home runs with a torn ACL last year, including 2 grand slams in the Oxford Regional to make him Oxford Regional MVP. And then he just keeps going, and he has an infield single on a torn ACL, and then he hits a double on a torn ACL. And then he just starts doing these things that biologically don't feel like they should be possible. And he gets the surgery over the off season, and he opts not to go to the draft. He comes back for a 5th season in Ole Miss with his COVID year, and all he does this year is hit 23 home runs to set a new Ole Miss single-season home run record. And in the Coral Gables Regional, he batted .780 with 3 homers and 2 doubles. And just the sort of things of, you see a guy who probably could have made a lot of money if he didn't tear his ACL. And not only did he say, I'm going to get the surgery and go pro, he didn't say that. He said, I'm going to not get the surgery. I'm going to come back and help this team win. And then I'm going to get surgery and come back even better. And it's been remarkable. He's a great kid off the field. He's a 4.0 GPA kid. I think he's a 3-time academic all-SEC honoree, 3-time, I'm pretty sure, community service team honoree, 3-time captain on this team. He was voted team captain in 2020 before the season, and he didn't play in 2019. He was a regular bench player. And that's the sort of respect he commands, the attention he commands. And Mike Bianco's been joking for weeks now that they're going to build a statue of Elko before they build a statue of him. I mean, at this point, if Ole Miss makes it all the way this week, there is starting to be a compelling argument for the Bunyan-esque mustachioed folk hero.
Nick, another guy that has quite a bit of power as well, doesn't quite have the 23 home runs that Tim Elko has, but is considered a top prospect for next year's Major League Draft. Jacob Gonzalez, maybe his numbers in terms of batting average and some of the things weren't as high as maybe people expected them to be, took a little dip from last year. What has his season looked like, and how important is he if Ole Miss is trying to win a national championship here?
Yeah, I wrote about this yesterday, if I'll give a shameless plug for ClarionLedger.com. But yeah, Jacob, his batting average fell from, I'm pretty sure, 355 to it's sitting at 279 this year. On-base percentage fell from, I think, 443 to 413. But if you look at the ancillary numbers, his slugging percentage is up, his walk rate is up, his strikeout rate is down, he's doing all these things. He hit 17 home runs, and I think he's only struck out 29 times this year compared to 46 walks. It's early. I don't have the numbers in front of me. But he's doing a lot of the things well that you take for granted when you're a guy with 17 home runs who's a projected top 10 draft pick. He's very patient at the plate. He takes a lot of pitches. He doesn't swing at bad pitches. He knows how to put the ball in play. Now, there are some things he needs to work on. He's pulling the ball entirely too much and grounding into the shift a lot. He needs to start making a little bit more solid contact on breaking balls that come in on him. He's not a perfect player yet. I'm not looking at him and saying, oh, this is 1997 Alex Rodriguez, but he's a shortstop who really has a high ceiling, really has a lot of potential. And he's been on base 27 games in a row. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I think he's only batting 230, 240 with a 27 game on base streak. And that shows you, man, he's not hot right now, but he's doing what this team needs from him. And he's scoring a ton of runs despite having a 279 batting average or whatever it is. He leads the team in runs scored. And that helps when Tim Elko and Kevin Graham bat third and fourth behind you. But it also shows just how much he's getting on base, just how effectively he is moving around the base paths, and how crucial his skill set has been to kind of the fabric of making this Ole Miss offense go.
We'll get you out of here on this. So John Gaddis is going to pitch left-hander tonight against Arkansas. Give us a little background on him, and also how you feel if Ole Miss wins tonight or wins tomorrow and playing in the championship series. When do you think it is?
Yeah, so John Gaddis is a grad transfer left-hander from Texas A&M Corpus Christi. He had an awesome year at Corpus Christi last year, came to Ole Miss this year as a high-priced grad transfer, was expected to be the number 2 starter, started the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season, really struggled against SEC play, kind of got relegated to a role in the bullpen, couldn't find his footing there, had an appendectomy and missed 2 weeks, and maybe that was the trick because he's just lights out since the appendectomy. I think a 2.31 ERA. He's a future doctor, so maybe it was just the medical. I don't know. Maybe it was good luck. Who knows? But they're throwing the lefty because Hunter Elliott had all that success against Arkansas the other day. And Arkansas, I think this year's batting about 30 points lower against lefties than they are against righties. Gaddis threw 2 1/3 shutout against Arkansas last time they played on May 1st. It makes sense, but the Rebs also have a ton of health and rest in the bullpen behind them. They should have just about every bullpen arm, maybe not Mason Nichols, but he only faced 5 batters the other day. He should be good too. I think they should have the full onslaught of their bullpen at their disposal. We will see how it manifests itself. I told people elsewhere this morning, I wouldn't be shocked if this was a 3-1 game, and I wouldn't be shocked if this was a 13-11 game. But I've watched a lot of Ole Miss Arkansas games over the last 4 or 5 years, and let me tell you this, I feel like we're much more likely to have a 13-11 game coming.
Oh, that makes a lot of people really happy. But it would be a close game, which we have not had any of the 10 games so far decided by 4 runs or less. I have one final question, because you covering Ole Miss, you also cover football. Lane Kiffin has been here a couple of times. I want to go back to last season. What the heck was that atmosphere like in Knoxville last year for Ole Miss, Tennessee?
It was weird. I'm not going to say you go to a
interesting way to describe it.
Like, again, I'm not going to say anything about any specific fan base, because I've learned in my years doing this business that only gets you in trouble. But I will say this: you don't go into that game expecting that to happen. But when you see it, you're like, oh yeah, this is the SEC. It's capable. So it was fun. I'm not going to say that it was a disgrace. I'm not going to say, oh, you got to rein people in. People are going to do things, and you got to take it with a sense of humor. It's college students. It's drunken, rowdy fans. There's a lot of stuff that happens. People got passionate. People got angry, and they had a call that didn't go their way, and they reacted poorly, or they reacted as if they were drunken, rowdy fans. I don't know how to put it, but I can just say, look, they had fun. They had their experiences. Hopefully they don't make a habit of it. But as somebody who it's his job to tell stories, it was a good story to tell.
Nick, we appreciate it. I hope you're enjoying your time in Omaha, and stay a couple of more days here covering Ole Miss.
All right. Thanks, y'all.
That's Nick Suss. I think that's the first time I've had in a while. Y'all.
Yeah, he opened with a y'all too.
Yeah,
We got a couple y'alls in there. I appreciate it.
So John Gaddis goes tonight for Ole Miss. He's only pitched 11 plus innings, a little over 11 innings since May 1. He has been pretty good. but all hands are on deck. When he said 3-1, I was like, But then he was like, nah, this is Arkansas Ole Miss, 13-11. Here we go, baby. Game starts at about 6:07. We'll get you home before 11:30.
Probably.
Real quick, can I throw in another tight end here that I know.
Did he play football at Ole Miss?
No, he didn't play football at Ole Miss. At least
Was he catching passes from Matt Corral?
He was catching a lot of passes. Let me just say this: he was a 3-time Super Bowl champion. He was an All-Pro. Played from 85 to 95. Jay Novacek. I mean, he could have been one of those guys that could have easily have been a. I mean, he had the size at 6'4", 235 pounds.
Now, you know where he's from, right?
Nebraska.
Did you have to look that up? Yeah, he's one of the best athletes ever from Nebraska.
Yeah.
Ever.
I was just looking up Ole Miss quarterbacks because Eli played against Nebraska in the wonderful Independence Bowl.
Yep, I remember that.
Chad Kelly
of East Mississippi Community College.
Yep. He got dismissed at Clemson.
Yep.
Then he went to East Mississippi, kind of redeemed himself. And then he actually a couple of years at Ole Miss when they were going through all the NCAA stuff, he was just trucking the ball over the place.
Oh, yeah. He was having a good old time at Ole Miss.
I forgot about Shea Patterson.
Oh,
he was there before he transferred.
I was saying, where did he transfer to Miami?
No, he went to Michigan.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, that's right.
Bo Wallace.
Yep, Bo Wallace.
Michigan is on.
Man,
he was. Bo Wallace was Last Chance U guy.
Are you serious?
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, that's
Chad
fine.
Kelly was right before Last Chance U. Bo Wallace was on Last Chance U.
Hail to the victor.
And now they've sent Matt Corral off to the NFL.
Got quite the motley crew of quarterbacks prior to Lano just showing up there.
How would you like to work in a state where your two college football programs, you cover Lane Kiffin and Mike Leach?
I would be thrilled to death. Sounds like a dream come true.
It was. So John Cohen, who is the athletic director, former baseball coach at Mississippi State, and I think he is in charge of the baseball selection committee. I could be wrong, but he has a position on that because he's here in Omaha.
Mm-hmm.
He also last year. So while Mississippi State was playing, he was in his role for the NCAA. And I noticed last night 2 nights ago after Ole Miss won, he came down on the field and was hanging out with the Ole Miss athletic director, who is writing a letter to Jack Deasing, the CWS president, about the beach balls. He said they should be banned. First time I've ever heard an athletic director say that. He's not very happy with how they interrupt the game.
Yeah, I mean, that feels like a real old man take.
Fine.
He's a younger guy, Keith Carter.
I mean, you can be a young guy and still have old man takes. Just look at Connor Happer.
True. Facts.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
But he was on the radio. He was on the Ole Miss broadcast. I don't know if he got caught up in things, but they had to delay the game, which is good for the radio because you get a longer interview with your athletic director.
Yeah.
Apparently he got upset.
Got pretty heated.
And I don't think it was like he's joking.
I mean, listen, it's been a thing at the College World Series for...
Don't. We got some angry DMs, by the way. Bishop hates beach balls.
Oh, Bishop hates beach balls. I know.
Bishop hates a lot of things.
Has there been
Beach balls are a big thing.
Old man take.
Has there been any fans on the field yet? I mean, did I miss anything?
No.
I don't think so. We haven't had any...
no, we've not had anybody...
No streakers.
Up until last night, the bleachers have been rather subdued because you're paying, full freight to sit out there. And also it's been 152 degrees.
Also you've got the sun just draining the energy from your soul.
And the games aren't close.
No, and they're over by about the 5th inning. And you got to sit around for another 4 innings.
Honestly, that's a lot of times when you get blowouts, that's when the bleachers start to get a little rowdy.
Yes.
Is they get a little unruly when the game's not keeping their attention.
Big news out of the USFL, which their season is coming to an end. The inaugural Coach of the Year award to the head coach of your New Jersey Generals, Mike Riley, who is the consummate professional football coach.
Just makes Nebraska fans yearn for brighter days.
I mean, he should win.
The Mike Riley era.
They have only one loss. They played 10 road games. I mean,
doesn't everybody play 10 road games in the USFL?
I was trying to make a case for Coach Riley.
I like playing against road games.
He's come across really good in this season.
Nothing new.
His personality hasn't changed since he was here.
I spat.
But I think that the non-NFL is right in his wheelhouse.
Sure.
I mean, he's become like the Mr. non-NFL professional football league coach.
Yeah, he was doing the AAF
in San Antonio
for a while.
Yeah, and I think they were pretty good.
I mean, listen, he's a good football coach. He's maybe not a great fit as an NFL football coach, maybe not a great fit as the head of a certain Big Ten school, but that doesn't mean he can't coach football. You know what I mean? Like, he got where he was for a reason. And, we've seen how hard it is to win at Oregon State. We've seen him be successful in certain places. There's something there. It's not like,
I think he's a good pro coach.
Yeah.
Because of the personality.
He's very laid back.
Yep.
He doesn't listen. There's some guys' personality, both college and pro, which is why the Jim Harbaugh thing as a pro you knew was never going to last. They just grate on people. He's a very easy, laid back kind of guy to get used to. He's got a pro coach feel. And I mean, he really only got the one shot at the NFL with San Diego a very long time ago. Like, who's to say he may not have been successful if he got another go at it?
But he is the USFL Coach of the Year. Think he gets a bonus?
If the league exists when it's bonus time, yeah.
I watched the opening week. I've tuned in periodically, but not very long. Really haven't checked the standings or anything, but I do keep track of some of the former Nebraska guys that play in it. They made it to the finish line.
Which is more than a lot of these leagues
playing
can say.
In one city in Birmingham. They have made it to the finish line for the USFL. And it sounds like they're making plans, solid plans to have year number 2.
I think they were smart in some of the things they did in terms of playing all in one location. I think trying some different rules was an interesting twist on things as well. It's just really hard to survive as a non-NFL football entity. I don't know. I don't know that there's a market for it. As much as we love football, I don't know that we love it enough to support a spring football league with any sort of.
And the football that we watch, professional, is as good as it gets. And right now, especially right now in the NFL, my thing with these leagues is, one, figuring out when to start.
Yep.
Do you go right on the heels of the NFL season ending, or do you wait kind of where the USFL did?
Spring, summer league, yeah.
And then what's your quarterback situation?
Quarterbacks,
if you don't have good quarterback play and notable quarterbacks, I'm not watching.
Well, that's the thing, is you don't just have to be good. You also have to be somewhat famous, or at least recognizable as a quarterback name. The other issue is, I just don't know. We saw this with the pandemic a little bit when all the football season and basketball seasons, their schedules got all screwy. People kind of like their sports calendar.
Yep.
And I don't know if we underestimated that before, but anything that got shifted off its normal spot, the ratings suffered as a result.
NBA, NHL.
People like their sports when they know they're going to happen.
Yep.
They like their schedule. And let's be honest, people don't watch, once the College World Series is over, you get in that July, August, people are on vacation. They just don't really watch that much stuff. It's a really tough sell, especially if you can't. The only thing I can imagine succeeding is an NFL endorsed feeder league. That's the only thing, because then it's got the financial backing of the NFL, and you have the potential of seeing guys, a better potential of seeing guys go from League A into the NFL. I think that could possibly draw people in, but I just don't think the appetite's there the way people assumed.
All right, coming up before we're done and we send it down to Baseball Village, I think it's Connor and Josh Odson today. Eric Bailey's going to join us here in a little bit. He is the beat writer for Oklahoma, covers the Sooners for Tulsa World. Get his thoughts on Oklahoma today. They're the other 2-0 team along with Ole Miss. Monty, stay right there. We'll take you when we come back. Sharp Betting in the Morning. Ravi in for Damon on 1620 The Zone. All right, Eric Bailey on the Oklahoma Sooners coming up in just a moment. But here is Monty. Hello, Monty.
Hey, how are you guys doing?
How are you doing? It's been a while.
Yeah.
Everything good?
Yeah, everything's
All
good. I think it's going to be Oklahoma, Arkansas in the finals. Arkansas is going to win it. Now, I will say this: Oklahoma is going to have an easier road getting to the finals because they already beat Texas A&M, and Texas A&M will probably be beaten today by Oklahoma because Oklahoma is a better team.
Okay.
Arkansas is going to have a little bit of a tougher road because they're going to have to beat Ole Miss twice.
Mm-hmm. Would it surprise you at all? I know what you just said. If the two teams that are 2-0 win tonight or today, that we don't have any baseball tomorrow, we don't have any baseball Friday.
I can't see. I really can't see Arkansas losing this game.
Okay.
Because just for what's on the line, I think they really want to get to the finals, and they want to do it for themselves and Dave Van Horn.
Yeah, that is a motivation, Monty. They have to play 5 straight days. Are you ready to give your season prediction, or do you want to wait until closer to the season?
For what? Football?
On Nebraska football.
Yeah, I'll give my season prediction right now.
All right, this is we're ready here. Shane is rolling on this. We're gonna hold on to this, and if you're right, then you will have scoreboard because I think I know what you're going to predict. What do you think the record will be this season?
Nebraska is going to go undefeated.
Okay.
Undefeated.
All right. You know what? I'll give you credit, Monty. You are consistent every year.
Nebraska.
Thank you.
All right. Everything else is good though, right?
Yep.
All right. It is always a pleasure to hear from you, my man.
Hey, it's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Hey, thanks for the phone call, Monty.
You bet. You have a good day.
Every year, Robbie.
I like the optimism.
Every year. Sometimes your optimism lasts more than a week, for a couple of weeks.
It did not last more than a week last year.
No. And if it doesn't last more than a week this year.
Well, okay. I don't care.
Yep. All right. Monty is the first in the house
to
suggest a unbeaten season.
He might be the last as well.
He loves Nebraska athletics.
Listen, I love the optimism. I love the attitude. I think we'd be better off if more fans had Monty's attitude.
So we've reached the point where if you were like low on the win total, I'm noticing just talking to people at the College World Series, even some people that work on these airwaves, now we've gone up a little bit. Did I miss something happen, a development in the week that I've been at the College World Series?
I have not gone up a little bit.
Okay.
I'm not sure what news may have caused the bump in some of the totals.
If you think that Nebraska football is dead and it's irrelevant and nobody wants to talk about it, just go to the College World Series.
Oh yeah.
People that I run into in the stadium, outside the stadium, all I want to talk about is Nebraska
All
football.
anyone wants to talk about most of the time.
Yeah. So there's still life.
I think we're okay for one more year.
One of those games will be against Oklahoma. We'll ask Eric Bailey a couple quick thoughts on OU football, but OU baseball, they've looked fun. They create chaos. They are more Zoom than the boom, and they will play Texas A&M today against a head coach from Texas A&M that is okay with saying, "Hey, we're here to play 4-hour games. I'm here to grow the game."
He's the only one that's okay with that.
That's Robbie. I'm Gary. Shane here as well. Sharp Betting in the morning at 1620 The Zone.
And on the first pitch, Ryan Cole pops one up behind the plate, coming over the first baseman, and he tumbles into the dugout and makes the catch. Oh my goodness! Robertson head over heels into the Notre Dame dugout, and he makes the catch to steal an out.
It was the first at bat the other night against Notre Dame. Blake Robertson, first baseman for Oklahoma, makes the catch, tumbling into the Notre Dame dugout, and the rest is history. And Oklahoma, on the heels of what they did in the Big 12 tournament, what they did in Gainesville, what they did in Blacksburg, and now what they're doing in Omaha, they are a win away from playing in the College Baseball Championship Series as we bring in one of the good guys in the business who we love talking Oklahoma sports with, Eric Bailey from the Tulsa World. Good morning, Eric. Welcome back to Sharp and Betting in the Morning.
Hey, guys. How are you guys doing today?
Good. It's going to be a beautiful day in Omaha. Could be a really, really good day for OU today against Texas A&M to get to the championship series. If we rewound about a month ago, Eric, did you think this was possible that Skip Johnson could get these guys on the kind of run that they are, where I think they're up to, 17 or 18 straight road games and now 3 wins away from winning a national championship?
Yeah, really. Who knew that this was going to happen, especially playing on the road, being away from Norman. And you had, I guess, if you look back at it, you look at their Big 12, what they were able to do late in the Big 12 season. They won 5 of 7 series in the Big 12. They had a late run to finish second in the regular season standings, so they were playing well. But as everyone knows, once you get to the NCAA tournament, it's another animal, a different animal. And what they were able to do at the Big 12 tournament and just ride that momentum, ride that success, it just seems like something clicked. It's not only on the field, it's off the field. It's their confidence. And it started with the Big 12 tournament when they went through that and won that. And I think they had a little bit of chip on their shoulder, too, because they really felt like they deserved to host a regional and weren't able to. Them and Notre Dame, I think, really, I think that really fed them when they found themselves kind of a little bit in an underdog role. They've kind of just rolled that to where they're at now.
Eric, this was a team going back before the season that was unranked, not expected to be certainly where they are now. At what point during the season did you realize this team could be pretty special?
I think when they went to Oklahoma State and they took a non-conference game against Oklahoma State, and then they went to Stillwater, and that's a big rivalry, and they were really just a bad inning away from winning that series. And for the longest time inside our state, everyone expected Oklahoma State to be the team that was going to Omaha. With the way that OSU started their season, they had a dynamite roster, great pitching staff, and all eyes. If you would have told me before the season there was going to be a team in Omaha, I would have picked Oklahoma State. But when they played well at Oklahoma State and Stillwater, lost the series but played well, I think you could see that they realized within themselves and the media and the fans also said that this isn't a bad team. And Skip Johnson, he deserves all credit because he's just like the perfect coach for this team. They just rally around him. He's down to earth, no ego. He goes out there, keeps it simple, and I think these players really enjoy playing for him, and they really feed off of that.
I would use the word, and that's a perfect way to describe him. Also unassuming. Why is a place, and you look at, you've got a high-profile athletic director who has made some really good hires, and there's some personalities in key head coaching positions in Norman. Why is he the kind of guy that can resonate and bring back OU baseball, where people are talking at OU baseball? And also, by the way, they're going to do $20+ million renovation of the ballpark. I mean, what kind of position is Skip Johnson in right now that he's on the cusp of a national championship? Why is he in this spot?
It's funny because if you look at his history, he was at the University of Texas for the longest time as a pitching coach. And that's, in 2020, they had a great pitching staff and they had a great season. And everyone expected them in 2020 to have a good shot to go to Omaha. But of course, the season was cut short and they kind of had to reset things. But if you look at Skip Johnson's track history, just what he's done with pitchers, both at the University of Texas and now today, Clayton Kershaw, he still talks to Skip a lot. I mean, they're good friends, and when he has questions, Clayton Kershaw asks Skip Johnson, "What should I do?" And you're right, unassuming is the perfect way to describe Skip because he goes out there. When COVID hit, best story was he made a video and he went to the creek and taught people how to wash their hands. It was funny. He said you find a creek, you get some soap, and it was like a minute long video, and it was just him reminding people to wash their hands. And he's in a creek, you get this soap, and you just rub your hands for 20 seconds. And he's a deer hunter. He likes to go out and hunt deer. And here's a little known fact about Skip too. When he got hired, I talked to him about it. He has like 9 or 10 300s in bowling. He's an excellent bowler. So he starts out assuming you would never expect that. But he's a bowler too, and we talked about that. He's like, I just like to bowl, and yeah. People, if someone gets one 300 game, it's a lifetime achievement. He has 9 or 10, so just a great guy you want to be around.
Eric, obviously you got a great pitching performance out of Cade Horton on Sunday. How's the pitching staff shaping up with that couple days of rest? You'd think they were basically at full strength. How do you think it'll shake out over in the game today?
It's funny because you couldn't ask for a better scenario for this pitching staff with what they're able to do and how they're able to use their pitchers. If they can get through today, find a way to win today, they got the rotation set perfect for this weekend. Cade Horton, he's coming off Tommy John surgery last year, and he was a big part of that turnaround too, because after that Oklahoma State series, they were just using him in spot relief, and they said, well, we're going to make the change. Let's put him out there and make him a starter, and he's just thrived in that role. Jake Bennett, young man out of the Bixby here in Oklahoma, or near Tulsa, he's their ace. And he's had a good season, and he's ready to go for the next game. He's a Friday starter, so he's ready. He'll be ready after today's game. And David Sandlin, who struggled a little bit in the postseason, but he's going to get the ball today. He struggled a little bit in the opener against Notre Dame. Against Texas A&M, excuse me. Skip wanted to get him out there for one inning just to taste it, and he struggled. But maybe that's a good thing, just getting him out there and letting him get an inning, because he's going to be out there and they're going to put all the weight on his shoulders today.
Isn't it interesting, Eric, that where the Major League Baseball draft, if it was back where it normally was and happened right before the College World Series, you're Oklahoma, you don't have to worry about Horton going anywhere. But now after his performance here the last couple of weeks, and especially the other night with all those scouts, I think he's elevated himself into the first round, a solid first-round pick.
No, I think I agree 100%. It's a good problem to have. But yeah, he, in the postseason, he's 3-0. He only allowed 2 runs against Notre Dame. He only allowed 2 runs at Virginia Tech. Just strong outings this whole tournament. He's 3-0, and really the only way you're getting runs off him is 2-run homers. He only makes 1 mistake pitch. It's not like he has 1 bad inning. He has 1 bad pitch, and other than that, he's able to work around that. So, no, I think that you're exactly right. He's a guy that you really got to keep on an eye on in the draft coming up pretty quick.
Eric, obviously you got Peyton Graham, who is most likely going to get drafted very high as well. Went 4 for 4 against Notre Dame, hitting the ball well in Omaha here. Outside of Peyton Graham, though, who in the lineup do you look to and say, this is the guy we really need to as a key to some production for Oklahoma?
Well, I think it's someone that really has already done the job, and you want to hope he can continue his hot bat. It's Tanner Treadaway. Oklahoma's 11-2 in the postseason since the NCAA tournament started, and he's hitting .518. It's kind of crazy. He's 29 for 56 at the plate during the tournament. Tanner Treadaway and Peyton Graham is the ultimate one-two punch. With what they've been able to do in that batting order. And even catcher Jimmy Crooks, he's someone else that's hitting well. Those 3 are really hitting the ball well. And Jackson Nicholas, another young man who's playing really well, nephew of Jack Nicholas. Mm-hmm. He's Jack Nicholas's nephew. He's hitting .317 this year too, or in the postseason, excuse me. I think those 4, with what they're able to do, they really carried this Oklahoma offense. But if you had to pick one player who you just would love to see a breakthrough, if you're an Oklahoma fan, it'd probably be Kendall Pettis, the left fielder. Speedster, you want him on the bases. You want him to get on, make things happen. He bats at the bottom of the lineup, which sets up when it rolls over. If Oklahoma can get Kendall Pettis to get a little bit more consistency, and that's not to say he's doing bad. He's not. But if you can get him a little on base and set up those other batters, the 1, 2, 3 of the lineup, you're in good shape.
Every time we have you on, Eric, we have to ask about football. We usually bring you on to talk about football, so I appreciate that you're coming on talking about Skip Johnson's team and OU being 2-0 playing Texas A&M this afternoon. Almost every year we could roll out of bed and under Bob Stoops or Lincoln Riley, OU was going to win 10 games. Now Brent Venables doesn't start from scratch, but there's part of the program that is starting from scratch in terms of personnel. So maybe projecting is going to be a little bit more difficult. After you have been around Coach Venables, you've seen spring, you know what the personnel is. What is your thoughts on what the season is going to look like for OU?
I don't think they're going to have a bad year. And you know what? Expectations were sky high under Coach Stoops and Coach Riley, but I don't think that's going to be the case this year. I think that people understand a little bit that it could take a little bit. There's going to be a transition period, nothing seamless. But I really think Brent Venables has really set a strong foundation for what he wants in terms of building a culture, creating that culture. And what helps Oklahoma is that he understands the Oklahoma culture. He's not brand new. He's not coming in and, doing wholesale changes and trying to figure out where the little towns in Oklahoma are, where the biggest fans are. He doesn't need that. He knows that. So I think that's the big thing that really helps. And Joe Castiglione, you talk about his hires. This was a knockout hire for Joe Castiglione. He needed someone like this because the football program, it was hurting. It was caught off guard, and they're not used to that. And I think that when he brought Brent Venables in, it really allowed the healing process to immediately begin. So I think that's big. Personnel-wise, it's going to take a little bit of time, especially with the move to the SEC. They're really going to have to get their house in order. By no means do I think Oklahoma's a 6-win team. I still think they're going to win 9 or 10 games. But once you got to prepare for that move to the SEC as well. And I think that's something that Brent Venables is really trying to work at.
Eric, as always, we appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
All right, guys. Have a good weekend. Thanks for having me on.
That's Eric Bailey from the Tulsa World. Baseball. Fun.
Runs.
Hopefully. Well, no. Tight games.
Close game? Question mark?
Yeah. We're headed to Baseball Village here in just a little bit. 12:40 pregame for Texas A&M and Oklahoma, and then the night at 5:40 for Ole Miss and Arkansas. Thanks, Ravi, for coming in.
Absolutely.
It's Christmas Eve for Ravi in the NBA draft, which we'll talk about tomorrow. For Shane, I'm Gary Sharp, betting in the morning.